traveling to consciousness, exploring spiritual journeys to find answers in uncertainty.
We are live. Are we live? Okay, and we are live. We are joined today by Joshua Zatkoff, and to kind of set this up a little bit, usually just jump into it, but to set this up a little bit, there's a YouTube channel, I gotta give them the shout out, called Delafay Testimonies, and Joshua was on there twice and shared his story, and I kind of came across it, and I was like, this story is certainly one of a kind, and certainly a very powerful and moving one. And I mean, first of all, dude, Joshua, to bring you into this, like, super cool that you're able to get this vulnerable with the darkness that you experienced and went through in your life.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you having me on, and you know, I truly believe that the things that we walk through that are difficult or whatever are for the benefit of others at some point, in some way, shape, or form. And so I believe I've always been a big believer in vulnerability. I think that there's a lot of power within that. You know, like, we all going through stuff, and I think a lot of times pride keeps us from sharing with one another. You know what I mean? So that's all I want to do.
Know exactly what you mean. Yeah, it was that's a huge reason I even started this podcast. Was I realized the power of vulnerability and the power that really has into it. And even as like men, and you come across as kind of a more masculine man too, you know, you got the beard, your history, your quote unquote street cred, let's say, and to even kind of just hear you talking about vulnerability, it echoes it's sentiment, it echoes what I've been trying to put forward here. So what a perfect guest other than yourself.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. So it's a wild story, and I don't know how much I really want to disclose, and I kind of want to just like leave it on your behalf to bring up what feels called to you. I know this beginning of your story kind of started with drug addiction, I'm not sure exactly which word you use, but kind of mental illness in a way. And it was always very fascinating to me. And this is something we've discussed on the podcast before with mental illness, where it's like this border between like crazy and I'm going to put genius in air quotes, where it's like you're kind of seeing this other side of reality that maybe the general public doesn't see. But I want to leave that as like a little teaser that we'll kind of get into as we kind of progress through this. But I mean, let's just start off like where in your mind does the story start? I feel like you usually talk about the age of 14. So I kind of want to leave it open-ended for you to start the story where you believe it started.
Yeah, I think so. I think it starts around that time was when the shift began. But, like, just very quickly, I was raised into a good home. You know what I'm saying? I wasn't rich, wasn't poor, had both my parents, had a very good upbringing. Nothing, crazy, traumatizing or anything like that happened. But I did have severe like anger as a child, like even like 7, 8 years old. There was this underlying deep like rage and almost like I didn't know how to process emotions or something like that maybe. And so like I started scratching my face when I was real young, and I would have these like rage outbursts that were a little bit more significant than just like an average 7-year-old having a tantrum. You know what I mean? But when I was around, I think I was 8 or 9. I went to Puerto Rico, and I ended up getting molested by my cousin, and he was a little older. I think he was 14 or something at the time, and I remember, some things happened, and I remember feeling like this strange atmosphere. Even as a child, like this strange atmosphere was present, where I 100% knew this wasn't normal, but also it's like, this is my older cousin. I'm gonna trust this is, I guess, what happens kind of thing. Right. And so, I never thought of it afterwards. It wasn't something where I would ever, and like literally until 3 years ago, I wouldn't have told you that it affected me. It was probably though, once I was around like 11, 12, I started identifying more with like remembering that it started coming back up. I forgot it for a couple years, and then it started resurfacing. And along hand with a few other things, around the time I was 12, I started getting deeply depressed without knowing what depression was, and At that point, I had gone to therapy a couple of times for my anger that I had. My mom had taken me a few times, and so I had this deep depression that was kind of there pretty early on. And again, it wasn't like something that I knew what it was. It was like, like you're a normal kid. Like I played sports, I was a normal kid. But I remember being like, I wonder if other people go through this, like this heavy feeling that I have, like, is this normal? Like I started to feel that, that when you're a kid, like the richness of life and like, like all that stuff, it seemed to like start dissipating. And it was like, I felt that like leaving me, and I had no idea what was going on, but I remember just being depressed. And around the same time, around, a little before I turned 13, I tried smoking weed for the first time. And man, it was like everything in my life clicked. It was the missing piece. It was like I thought I was the best version of myself. I felt like I was funnier. I felt like people
Wow.
liked me more. It's like it was this clicking piece. And so basically from that point on, weed was like, that was like everything to me. I remember telling my mom, like, all I want is just someone to leave me in a room with weed, unlimited weed, and just everyone leave me alone with weed, and I'm good. And that was all I wanted.
It's a crazy wish.
Hey, when you're 13, I guess you know what I mean. You got limited mind or something.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was like, I mean, that was it for years, and then I started getting into around 15, I started getting into psychedelics. I think I did acid for the first time, and I did mushrooms for the first time. And those opened me up to a whole new, it was like weed for the second time kind of thing. Like at that point I did like ecstasy a couple times. I tried a couple things and it was like cool. But when I did the mushrooms the first time, it tapped me into a whole new, consciousness, a whole new level of thinking, a whole new perspective. And I'll never forget that, just shattering my perspective of life. And so I was deeply like drawn to that after that, and more so for the spiritual reasons. I wasn't even spiritual at that point. I had no um language for any spiritual stuff at that point. I was baptized Russian Orthodox. I went to church, but it was like God wasn't talked about in my house. It wasn't pushed on me. It was just like, something you do on Sundays kind of thing. And so
What is Russian Orthodox a branch of Christianity?
yeah, it's sort of like Catholicism a little more. Like it's they stick to like the, like Russian Orthodox is more so like they try to stick to the Orthodox traditions of it. And so there's some things that is different within, your typical Christianity in America. And so they stick to some older traditions, and at least they that's what they say they're doing. And so I just remember it being real boring,
Sure.
like these real long services and music and speaking in Russian and stuff like that. It just wasn't, I never gravitated towards it. There was never anything there for me that brought it to life. And so, going on, when I was 15, I got sent to a rehab. And when I got sent to this rehab, um, I started getting into Buddhism. And because, I was in the very like just rough place. It was the first time in my life where I felt like I was kind of on my own, and I was 15. I'm in Utah. The first like 2 months I was literally in the Moab desert, you know what I mean? And just like the middle of winter, just hiking in this wilderness program. And man, it was like the most liberating and empowering, experience, but it was also at the same time traumatizing because I was 15, and so like a little 15-year-old kid, you think you're older at that, but I felt like I just got thrown to the wolves in a sense, and I'm just with people I don't know, and having to make fire by myself, and if I can't make my shelter, then I'm gonna freeze it. I mean, that's kind of how it felt. And it was like, dang, you better, So I got this sense of really looking after
Better figure some
myself.
shit out.
Yeah. I'll never forget, man. The very first night out, they send you to a base camp for a week to like just teach you the basics. Like I had to learn how to bow drill, how to make a shelter with the tarp, like these basic survival instincts. And then they send you to a group where you guys basically, like, we would hike 5 miles every day, then camp, and then you'd hike to your next food drop. And so it's kind of like that. And I'll never forget the first week that they threw me in the camp, like in the movement. They had like the worst storm they had all year, and it was like 60-mile-per-hour winds, so like negative 30 degrees at night. It was like this crazy storms they're having, this winter blizzards.
Brutal.
And dude, I'm the first night, I remember I tied my little tent or whatever, my hands numb, couldn't even tie my knots. And dude, I got my tent and my sleeping bag, and then just blew away. Like a gust of wind came and just blew the shelter away. And dude, I just laid there and cried. It was like, you know what I mean? Like, I was like, this is not happening right now. You know, I just curled up a little ball, just went to sleep. Like, I was like praying. I just woke up frozen or something, you know. But yeah, man. So
Jeez,
it was
that sounds
interesting.
traumatizing in itself.
Yeah, it was cool though, man. I'll never forget that experience. It was pretty cool to be out there and hiking and stuff like that. But you know, I
Well,
went to, huh?
to back it up just a little bit, where so you were 15. I kind of want to just like set the stage a little bit more too, because you said you were 15 when you went into rehab. And so I'm kind of curious, like, was that your decision? Was that your parents' decision? Did you like, because you were going through this like time of not sure if everybody else was in the same mindset of you, right? Like this
Mm-hmm.
darkness coming in. So was there like a moment where there was like a switch that was like, okay, there's something a little bit off here where I do need to go to rehab? Like, was there a moment that kind of clicked for you, or was it someone else saying, "Hey, I think you should look at rehab"?
No, so my mom, you know, and my dad had a bunch of alcoholism on his side of the family. My mom, she had I think 6 or 7 sisters, and a lot of them dealt with mental illness and addiction. And so when my mom mainly started to see that I was like smoking weed, she found out when I was like 14. When they found out I was doing that, obviously in my mind, every kid's doing that in high school. You know, I might have been a little early off starting, but all my friends were doing it. I didn't think I was doing anything crazy. You know what I mean? And so the more they kind of worried, the more I kind of rebelled, I guess, or, you know, fought it. And then I remember my mom took me to a like a psychiatrist to get a, you know, evaluation or whatever. And I had to go to like the little psych ward to get an evaluation and all this stuff and do all this testing. And they had, you know, they diagnosed me with bipolar disorder, um, manic depression, and ADD. And after that, you know, you don't realize it at the time, but at that point, I think you subconsciously identify with that. You wear that. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I have these
For
issues,
sure.
you know. And so I think that's when I started realizing, whether I admitted it or not, like something's wrong with me. You know, I started feeling like, man, something's wrong with me. You know, all my other friends are like going out and doing this, and I feel like I'm locked in a psych ward on the weekend. You know, like you know what I mean? I started to feel like something's not right here. But I didn't think I was doing anything crazy, you know, at the time. And so it was a combination of me acting out, them worrying, and trying to be good parents. You know, like they were just trying to help me, you know. But you can't help people when they're not ready for help, or they don't even see there's a problem. So it was their
I've
choice
learned
to
that the
send
hard
me.
way.
Yeah, yeah, we all do. So yeah, it was their choice. But when I went to the next part, it was a year-long thing. After 2 months, I went to another program that was in St. George, Utah. And there was I was this doctor had me on some like high dosage ADD medicine. And so it was like an Adderall, but an Adderall on steroids. It was like a very, like, they stopped using it in the 60s. Doctors, that when I came home were like, I don't know how you got this. But anyways, I'm on this, which gave me this severe focus. I learned how to draw overnight. You know what I mean? I could draw on it. Now I can't draw. I don't know what happened, but you
Wow.
know, they you know, I got
In the
into it.
drug, I guess.
It was a powerful drug, man. It taught me how to be an artist and everything. But
Yeah.
they I found this book. It was a Buddhist book, and I read it. And I remember when I started to read it, it was all my mushroom experience and everything. I think I only did mushrooms once until that, and acid once at that point, because it was like right after I had, you know, found it or experienced it. And I remember everything in
So
this
then
book.
was it primarily weed? Was it primarily weed that
Yeah,
you
it was
were
mostly just
diving
weed,
into?
and then I tried, you know, I did like some cough syrup. I did, you know, like little kid stuff. I drank a few times. Never really cared for drinking. I did like ecstasy. That was about it. It was mostly just weed, and then I had just started to kind of, you know, try other things. And
Gotcha.
so when I read this book, I'm like, dude, this is everything that I felt on the mushrooms. So I'm reading this book, and it was like the ideologies behind it, and I guess the view of life in a sense was lining up with my mushroom trip. So the same stuff I was kind of
And
starting to think.
what view would that be?
Well, there was this sense of like we're all one. You know, like love is the ultimate truth in life. There was this sense of being connected was the main thing that stuck out to me. I remember being on the mushrooms and feeling so connected to everything and everyone. I felt tuned into other people's emotions, kind of thing. And then it was this sense of zooming in on life, as far as seeing the beauty in like the most basic thing, like, oh, look at this leaf. And, in normal mindset, it's like, oh, cool leaf. But on the mushrooms, I
Right.
was like, dude, this is the coolest leaf I've ever seen. You know what I mean? And so
This
Buddhism,
is the fucking universe in a leaf.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so the Buddhism kind of started to, I guess, support that. And I'm finding the same kind of, things with whether it's karma or whether it was, the Eightfold Path and all these things. And I'm learning. And I'm like, oh, this is backing up everything that I experienced. I said, this is it. And I remember, and for no apparent reason, I was so turned off towards religion. So when I'm reading it, I'm like, dude, this isn't even a religion. I'm like, this is sick. This is just a way of life. And so I got really into meditation. I got really I mean, I was in a rehab, I had nothing to do. So all I was doing was reading Buddhist books and meditating all night because I had this medicine they gave me had me up all night. So, you know what I mean? I had nothing to do but sit there and,
Yeah.
and meditate and read and stuff and draw. And so I started to get really into it. And then when I came home, man, I was a different person. I really was. I remember uh, just being so turned off towards everything that I thought was cool before. All my friends were like, "Dude, I don't know what happened to you." I was different. I think in part it was definitely traumatized or something. Definitely changed in me with the combination of I think the medication. I had psychosis. I started to feel like demons were after me. I started to think demons were friends with me. So I started to have a lot like sincere psychosis. Like I'd stay up at night with a knife and think, demons were trying to kill me and people were in my house. So it was some serious stuff that was happening.
Oh,
And
jeez.
I didn't tell anybody about it. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of like dealing with it privately. And I came off that medication
And
and
so then, in a mind, just for my kind of clarity, you're on this medication, you kind of discovered Buddhism, and so you're meditating, I'm guessing while on the medication as well,
yeah,
and then you get out. Were you in rehab at this time?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, and then you kind of progressed out of rehab, and once you got out of rehab, is that whenever the demons entered the picture, or was that while you were still in rehab?
No, it's actually funny because I was in rehab and I started having, I don't know if you ever had sleep paralysis. Um, I started to have sleep
One time.
paralysis one time. Yeah, so I started having sleep paralysis in the rehab, and
Scary shit.
yeah, dude. And so it was crazy because um, it was extremely intense and scared me, but it was also extremely profound and intriguing. So it was like kind of, it's like you see a horror movie, like you kind of close your eyes and look at the same. It was like that, and so it would happen,
Yeah.
and it was crazy because there was no vision to it. I would wake up paralyzed, but then it would feel like someone's hands were in my brain, dude. It was so weird because like I never experienced like this before. I'd be dead asleep, just like in that frozen, like void of a place, but fully alert and awake, and it would feel like somebody's hands were like twisting my brain like a sponge or something. I had it for like a week and a half straight where there was another one where it felt like someone was like drilling my, I mean, it physically hurt. And I would wake up to myself like screaming in pain. Like I physically could feel it, like someone doing surgery on my brain. It was really weird. And so I'd pray like, don't let this ever, and I didn't, at the time I wasn't praying to a specific God, just kind of like, God, just don't let this happen again. And I remember it stopped. It didn't. I didn't. I had it like 3 nights in a row, and then I prayed that, and it stopped. And then I remember the next day, I was like, "Dang, I wonder what happens if I stay in that state. Like, I don't like that fear's like ruling me right now." I said, "I wonder if next time it happens, I just don't freak out and just sit there and see what happens." And so it came back again, and it just got worse and worse, and like what I mean, it just stayed in that state of pain basically and didn't progress from there. And so I'd freak out and manage to get awake. And then one night it happened, but this time there was a vision with it associated with it. It was the first time I had any vision. So in the dream, I'm seeing they had night guards that sit by certain doors, so I always had one by my door. And so I'm looking at the night guard lady, and she's wearing the same outfit. Everything is exactly
Let's
as.
one sec. Let's back up here a little bit. So I'm not 100% sure what you're saying by night guard. My perception is that sometimes when you go into like a sleep paralysis, you'll see like kind of like shadow beings. So is that what you're kind of referring to?
Oh, no, 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 I'm saying in the rehab. In the rehab, there was
Oh,
people that would
oh, okay.
like night staff, and so they would sit at the door. Like there was like 5 or 6 of them, and they would
Mm.
sit at certain doorways. And there was one that would sit outside my door. And so I
Okay,
saw
gotcha.
her, and she was wearing certain clothes and all that. And in the dream, in the sleep paralysis state, I looked over at her, and she was wearing the same outfit. Everything was as it was in reality. So I'm thinking
Okay,
I'm
gotcha.
awake.
So we're
Yeah.
we're back in the rehab. Gotcha.
Yeah. No,
Okay.
this because you were asking when it started or whatever, and I was saying that this is when it started.
Right.
So
I
this
lost my own train of thought.
no, you're good, man.
This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by Mushy Love. Mushy Love is a latte type blendable mushroom caffeine free elixir that honestly tastes like a liquid cinnamon roll. And I know that you're going to find that on their website, but it's honestly true. It's stacked with more than twice the amount of mushrooms as any other mushroom latte. And I know that there's one in particular that we all think about, which kind of starts with the word mud, but this one blows that one out of the water. I highly recommend, if you even try that one, to just give this one a shot. And I promise you that you will not be sorry, because I just, it's so good. It's honestly so good. And I want to get to a place where I can actually they send me these all the time for free. So please go and buy it, because if you buy more, then they'll start sending me more. And it's just honestly a win-win, because it tastes amazing, like even in water. So even if you're cutting, even if you don't want to like put milk or coffee with it, you can just do it plain in water, and it's so freaking good. Guys, go click the sponsors link below, scroll down to Mushy Love, buy your pack today. Remember promo code Clayton, I can't even talk right now, promo code Clayton at checkout for 10% off your purchase. Mushy Love. Mushrooms shouldn't have to taste like mud. Give yourself some Mushy Love.
You're good. And so anyways, I'm looking at this lady and I'm thinking I'm in real life. And so I'm looking and I go to sit up and look at her, and all of a sudden this big blue, like demonic creature jumps up, dude, like right in front of my face. And it looks at me and it says, "You thought I would leave you that easy?" You know, basically, because I prayed like, "Oh, leave, like stop," and it said, "You thought I would leave you that easy." And dude, I freaked out because it was so real, right? Like, and so that was when it started. That was when it started, and I started to feel like there was spirits in my life. Like, I mean, I just started to feel like there was other entities around me. I started to feel like I was connected to like the spiritual realm. I remember there was a kid at the wilderness part. He was like this kid had all types of stuff going on, but he was like a psychic or whatever, or some sort. And I remember he did like a palm reading on me, and he told me, he said, "You're a gray walker." And to this day, I don't know exactly what that is. I've tried looking it up, but he basically said, "You're a gray walker." He said, "There's going to be a time in your life where you have a near death experience. And after that, he said, you're going to start to be able to communicate with the other, like the, spirit realm." And so I remember that what came to my mind. I'm like, dude, I feel like I'm starting to have these, even though the almost dying part didn't happen. I'm like, I feel like I'm starting to connect. So that stuck with me for some reason. And so that's when it started. And then when I came home, it just was progressing. And I definitely do think a lot of it was the medication. However, I know that, dude, like those effects didn't, like, a part of me changed for years. I mean, like over a decade, where I was just not the same person anymore, dude. Like something shifted in that rehab. Something, my whole personality changed. I used to be extremely like outgoing and, like class clown type of kid. After that, dude, I was going to school before anybody got there. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't talking. I was just very introverted after that experience. And so that kind of happened. And
Do you feel like it scared you? Do you feel like it scared you or something?
No, I think it just, I don't know, man. I think it just I think I got exposed to just a certain level of life that kind of sucked the childhood out of me. It had nothing to do with the spiritual stuff. My whole perspective on life shifted to where I'm like, dude, all these kids are caring about like Jordans and parties and all this stuff, and I'm like, dude, I'm trying to find the meaning of life. I would like sit in class and be like, I
Yeah.
wasn't, I still love my friends and everything, but I'd be like, dude, these kids care about stupid stuff, and that, like I was like, I don't know, like just my mind was like, I'm thinking about Buddha and I'm thinking about like meditation and like I'm thinking about these other things. And so that's what I mean. It just, my life, I got a lot more serious, I guess. Like
Gotcha.
I lost the innocence of just being a
It's like
high schooler.
spiritual maturity or something.
Yeah, something just woke up in me where that's what I knew, like life was about this. And so, but that didn't change the drugs for me. Like to me, drugs were the gateway. Not necessarily the gateway to get there, but they were a tool to get there, and specifically psychedelics. And so when I came home, um, I started smoking again. And I was like, all right, I need to start tripping more. And so at that point, just basically began when I was 16. Just so little preference. So I come home at 16. I come home at 16. I was graduating early because I did in the rehab. I did a bunch of independent studies. So I'm set up to graduate. I mean, I'm like a junior, and I'm getting out at like 10 o'clock in the morning. And I was about to graduate early, and so at 16, I get my first legal trouble. I get my, get a weed charge or whatever. Puts me on probation, and I end up getting locked up for violation. I go back to school the next year. I got arrested literally the first day of class because I had ran away from home, and so I was on the run for like the last couple of weeks of summer. And I was like, whatever, the police are gonna come get me, and I went and I just got my GED. I was like, whatever, I'm just done with school. So I got my GED. Now I'm 16. I'm out of school, and I basically I'm going down this path, and I end up starting to do painkillers. And so at 16, I started doing painkillers. Before I was 17, I had started shooting up heroin, basically. And so from there, it began basically, I'll just say from, 16 to 25 was just this endless, restless search for truth while simultaneously fighting this severe drug addiction, mental illnesses, just I'm not medicated, just a full-blown just wild ride. And I don't know how much detail of what times I want to zoom in on for that. I don't know if there's a certain if there's certain questions you have right now to kind of anything you want me to zoom in on.
I mean, the one thing that's coming to mind pretty clearly, I guess, is to like understand what concoction, I guess, of drugs you were experiencing at this time, right? Like, what did that timeline kind of look like? Because I know there's a lot of moments to dissect throughout those 16 to 25. But like, what did I mean, and maybe this is probably a good part just in general, right? Even you could start at 14 if you'd like, of like when you started trying each drug, when it kind of came into your life, right? Like you started with weed at 14 and then you did that until 25. Do you kind of see where I'm going with this? Is
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
lay that landscape of what medications and recreational drugs you were doing throughout this time frame?
Yeah, so by the time I was 16, I stopped taking doctor medication, right? Because I remember I was taking mood stabilizers and depression pills and all that. And I'll never forget, I got locked up in JDC or juvie or whatever, and I self-requested to stay in my cell for 3 days. Like these medications made me feel like a zombie to the point that I decided to lay in a cell for 3 days rather than. And when that happened, I said, I'll never take medication ever again. Like I literally I just felt like a dying animal. Like you see these lions that have their spirits broken in the circus. You know what I mean? That's how it felt. And I said, I'm never taking medication again. And so at that point, I stopped taking, doctor prescribed medication. But at 16, when I started doing heroin, at 16 is basically, I opened the door to everything. Like once you stick a needle in your arm, it's like everything's open for, you know what I mean? It's like, it's all fair game at that point. And so at that point, it was like I was doing whatever came to me, but weed started slowing away. Once you get a opioid addiction, that takes priority, and so the weed is kind of just a bonus. But so the main thing was Xanax, and painkillers, heroin. And this was when it was real stuff, not the fentanyl stuff. So that was the main thing. But psychedelics to me were always I always wanted that. Like that was something I was always pursuing for my spiritual life. Like on the side, I'm still maintaining this seeking thing spiritually. And so psychedelics were definitely like always hand in hand with it. The opiates at that point, really, it just, when you get to a point where it's just, you just do it to function. It's not like you're really like getting high. Like after pretty quickly, you're not like out there like getting high. Like I just needed it to function in life and not be sick. And so that I just felt normal at that point. It didn't feel like I was on anything. I just know I needed it, and so that was pretty much the main thing, but I had seasons. It was kind of like you have different seasons for things, right? It's like I had a 2-year period where I was like doing a lot of PCP. I was smoking heavy dippers. that was, I mean, that was a crazy time period. I had, you know, some angelic encounters on that, and some crazy, you know what I mean, some weird things happen on that. And I had you know, season of, I think that was really the only thing I dove into heavily, was PCP around like 2011, 12, 13, that time frame. um was PCP was pretty heavy. But other than that, it's just like, you at a party, someone offers you coke, cool, but it wasn't like I would never go buy coke, like, you know what I mean, I never cared for coke. It was mostly just weed, psychedelics, and you know, heroin. That was my main thing, you know. And I drank a little, you know, here and there. I'd binge drink, but that's pretty much it, you know.
Yeah, and so where my mind's going is like this is something that I am completely unable to relate to. I've never gone as far past the psychedelic rabbit hole.
Hmm.
So I can't physically relate to it. Where my mind kind of goes with it is to think about, you know, people who usually you see on the street who
Mm.
are, you know, kind of talking to themselves, and it seems like they're talking to someone else that's right beside them.
Yeah.
And it sounds familiar to your part of the story where you're like, I had encounters with angelic beings, because it's always kind of struck me, and we started off the podcast kind of touching on this, which is like where's the line between crazy and genius? And
Mm.
in my experience with psychedelics, I always kind of saw that there was this veil that was kind of getting lifted from me, right? I was kind of peering into the spirit realm, if you will.
Hmm.
And I always was curious of if that's almost what people who are quote unquote crazy in our society are actually looking into. So now that you're at where you're at in this path, like looking back on it, do you believe that I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I guess my current belief is, I'll phrase it this way. My current belief is that the drugs have pulled the veil of consciousness of this material world from their eyes too quickly or too soon, and they're not able to mentally integrate what they're seeing. And, you know, that, I guess that's my kind of my belief currently. Do you
Hmm.
feel like that's accurate? Would you put any amendments onto that? Do you feel like that's not quite accurate?
I know. I think it's absolutely. I would say it's accurate, but I think there's more to it too. I don't think it's that simple, but I think it's definitely a part of it. I mean, I'm a very firm believer in demons. I'm a very firm believer that there is definitely evil energy, spirits, whatever you know. What I mean, there's evil out there. I believe that there's devils, and so I think it goes hand in hand. There are situations where I think people really do get plagued by demonic power, and they get oppressed by that, twisted by that, and just tortured by that, really. But then I also think there are situations where you're engaging with that realm and not having, like you said, the mental awareness or the spiritual awareness to integrate everything. For example, I'll give you one example. I think like with spiritual discernment, one thing that is pretty common within it is a lot of people think they're going crazy. If you're growing in spiritual discernment, you could think you're going crazy, and the reason why is because when you're picking up other people's stuff, you start to not be able to understand what's me, what's others. And I know I started dealing with that when there's been seasons God's kind of had me in like more spiritual discernment, and you have to really know what's in me, what's like in my space, and what's, you know, because a lot of us live deceptive where we think we, you know, but there is stuff in us. But then there's also the other end of it where, all right, what's in my space, and now I know, okay, when I go out, this isn't coming from me. You know what I mean? And so a lot of people, I think, that are dealing with it's kind of similar, where you start going out and you're picking up things, and you have no, it's just this big mess of a ball kind of consciousness or messages, frequencies, whatever coming to you, and you don't know how to navigate or sort it out. You just kind of internalize everything as you. And I think that leads a lot of people to thinking they're crazy, thinking they're hearing this, seeing that. You know what I mean? I think that is another aspect to it. So I think that that's fair. And like I
And I
said,
think I think that's something you can see. You can even see that outside of drugs. Like
yeah, yeah.
I feel like I've even seen it even in myself. It's kind of interesting. If I want to take on like a personality trait, I think one that I was focusing on recently was like being more definite, being more knowing in what I'm saying, as opposed to
Mm,
this like kind of quasi in the background. And I was pulled by source, by God, by spirit to watch more of Suits.
mm,
I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but it's a show about lawyers. and everyone in it is very like definite. They're very cut and dry. They're very
Mm.
much in their knowing. They're in their, masculine knowing. And I found it so fascinating because the more I watch that show, there's not all the qualities I want to take on. I'll put that caveat out there. But the more I watched that show, I could feel that it was like this more alignment with myself. There was this
Yeah.
more like resonating with that frequency, if you will. And I'm sure you probably felt that the more you read these Buddhist ideas, the more you meditated, the more you consume that information, it almost like aligns you more with that given path.
Yeah, no, it did because and like I said in this time now, so like I get deep into the Buddhism stuff. Obviously, as drugs picked up in my life, it wasn't like I was as faithful as meditating as I used to be. But I always that mindset was permanently imprinted on me. So I'm still like flowing in life from this perspective, from a Buddhist or Taoism mindset or whatever, and I kind of been seeing life through that filter. But so the psychedelics to me were my little getaway to go to that place. Um, and so I would always see them together. Like I guess that's kind of what you're saying is like it would they would feed each other for me, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I was. Yeah, I, I think it took it on like a little side thing, but I think the main point is you were bringing up about how the discernment of what's somebody else's, BS or what's someone else's stuff and what's mine. And I guess I was kind of showing that corollary of if you actually want to take on a trait from somebody else, the idea is that you would surround yourself with them more,
Oh, okay, okay,
right? As
okay,
opposed to, like, yeah, like in
okay. No,
I
I
to
misunderstood
kind
what you were
of,
saying.
I don't want to get too oh, it's
Yeah,
all
yeah,
right. It's all right. Sometimes my brain works in weird ways where it picks up different stuff, so it it may have gone down a little weird track there.
yeah. No, no, no. I get what you're saying now. Yeah, to surround yourself with something you want in your life, basically. Yeah,
Sure. Yeah, and like yeah, if whatever direction you want to take it, if you're around people who are, for instance, doing a lot of weed, doing a lot of different drugs, then you're just going to associate that with being the normal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. For sure. And I think that was part of the frustration in my life is I felt like man, I've really always been a spiritual seeker since I was like 15. That's really what I've been about. And there wasn't a lot of that. It's getting a lot more popular now, but 15 years ago, I was 15. Um, there wasn't really, I mean, it was probably popular in certain areas, but just not where I was at, not in like my stream of friends. But I remember
For sure.
whenever it started to become, and it definitely is true to this now. It's kind of like this spiritual aesthetic, it's like a fad. And so I remember when the like, peace sign, hippie nirvana like stuff was going on, and it was just an aesthetic. It was just like, a cool fad or something. And so it was like this, it wasn't real spirituality in my perspective. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, yeah, we trip on acid and, get groovy, dude, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah, it was like surface level.
yeah, it was
It's
very
almost like
surface
surface
level.
level.
Yeah, and so like, but I was interested in doing like the work of like really like diving into this thing and really changing and evolving and and really like I wanted to be a vessel of like peace and make a difference in the world. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's where my mind was. So when I was tripping with people, they more so wanted to do it on a party level, like recreationally, and I was kind of always wanting to find other people or a way to make it deeper. And so I think that there wasn't a lot of people around me that were more spiritually invested. And so that definitely was a lack where most of the people in my life were just getting high to get high. And so
Yeah. And I think because I do want to get back to your story because
yeah,
and we're barely scratching the surface of it in my opinion. But
yeah.
I think one question that's been kind of coming up for me is what maybe if you have a timeline of your thoughts on this idea or what your current idea is now of like the idea of reincarnation.
Oh
Do
man.
you believe in it? Is it yes? Is it no?
So yeah, for me, I don't believe in reincarnation. I mean, and we'll get into this. I'm a Christian, and so I do believe that we have just this one life on in this planet. You know what I mean? I don't believe in reincarnation. Um, and I used to believe in it, and I know I've definitely seen some, moving testimonies of stuff like that. I mean, I get it, but at where I'm at now, I don't believe that we reincarnate.
Okay. I'm
Just to
I'm
get,
curious because
just
of
to give
how
you,
your
yeah,
story plays out.
uh-huh.
Yeah, because it seems interesting with how, you know, it. Maybe we should let's get back to your story before I
Yeah,
dive
we can get into
into
all this. That's
why
what I
I'm interested
figured.
on your thoughts on that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what I
okay,
wanted to kind of
let's
get.
then save that for the end.
Yeah, we can get into all
Okay.
that. No, so and I'm not trying to spend too much time on my story for those reasons, for like if you any of that kind of stuff. So basically though, so when I was around 2021, 2012, um, I'm doing at this point. I had started doing DMT a lot, or I wouldn't say a lot, but I had started pursuing, it wasn't like I could just find it every day kind of thing. So anytime I get DMT, I'm getting DMT, doing the psychedelics. I started going to psychics. Started doing like Reiki because I was going to massage therapy school. I had one of my classmates did Reiki, so she would do Reiki on me. I'd give her a massage. I had another friend doing Reiki. I'm getting more into these other spiritual things. I'm playing Ouija boards just for the hell of it, really, and I'm getting deeper and deeper into, I guess, uh, just another, like, kind of, I felt like I was splitting in two, like I was living in two realities almost. And I remember though, but my life is getting darker and darker. Like my heroin addiction is just starting to get like really taxing. One of my childhood best friend, died in a car accident on the way to see me, and I was drunk driving, like, double the distance he was driving, and he ends up being, so that was weighing on me. Like it was the only person I felt like was like my true like friend, brother that I had. He died the year prior. Just a bunch of dark stuff is happening. I just had a baby. I had a baby at 18. So I'm like this kid with a, kid. And just like my life, I was like, if I felt like I was just looking at my life like this didn't happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like, how do you ruin your life before you're 25 kind of thing? That's kind of how I felt. And I remember sitting on my porch one night and I was drinking, and I was like, like, I'm like, dude, I'm done. I was like, and I have had suicidal tendencies up until this point. I would cut myself, and I had this stuff was always there, but I never thought I'd have the balls to like act on it. You know what I mean? It was kind of just something you'd think about and fantasize about. But I remember this specific night, I just said, I'm done, dude. Like I really just don't care anymore. I just don't want to be here. I've done all these things to try to like better my life, and to like I just feel like I just keep getting deeper entangled in darkness, and it just sucks. And so I just got up really nonchalant. Honestly, it wasn't emotional. I just said, "Yeah, I'm done." And I walked to my house. I got a microphone cord, and I lived on a battlefield, and so there was Civil War posts throughout where my land was, and it was this like 22 foot cliff, and then it was a creek that would pass around my house. It was like half my house was on a cliff side, and then the other half was flat ground or whatever. And so the cliff side there was a fence, and then there was a little drop, and then it was like a little creek, and then it broke off to a stream. And so I remember I just tied the cord on the fence post, tied the other end of my neck, sat there for a second. I was like, yeah, I'm done. And I just said, all right. And I walked over to the end, and I just stepped off. Like, wasn't thinking really. I just did it. And I remember the intensity of like once I felt that cord pull and my like body weight like like that catch. That first split second thought was, oh crap, like this was a mistake. It was just like this wasn't the right move. And then next thing I know, I was out. Like that was the last thing I remember. But then it was like I found myself awaking in a dream, is what it felt like kind of similar to sleep paralysis or something, where I found myself waking up in another state. But I'm completely unaware of myself or what I had done, time, space, like I'm just conscious in this other reality, right? And in this reality though, I'm cold, I can't move, and I feel like I can't breathe. It felt like something's around my neck, and I'm sitting there like trying to like move. I can't even, what I mean, I feel like I'm stuck, but I have no idea why. And out of nowhere, I start seeing this light out of my peripheral vision start moving towards me. It wasn't a big light, it was like, a smaller light, but it started moving towards me. And when it got, I don't know, like maybe 10 yards away or something, all of a sudden I just felt whatever was on my neck. And again, I didn't know what it was. I just felt whatever pressure was on my neck just kind of release. And then next thing I know, I'm popping up and I'm in the water. It's the middle of December, January, or something. It's wintertime. And so it's freezing cold. And I just get up out the water, I pop up, and I realize I'm wet. Everything hits me what had just happened. So I climb up this little hillside, and I'm like, just like, what did I do? I'm a mess. I mean, I'm like bawling because I'm like, dude, you really just did this. And like, you know what I mean? And so I'm like connecting the dots, like, what the heck did I, like, it didn't feel like it was me that made that choice, basically. You know what I mean? Like, felt like something took me for that ride. Um, I'm like sobering up, like, real quick, like, holy crap, dude. Like, and the crazy thing is I looked and the cord's still attached to the fence. So it went double the length. It's still tied to the fence. It was still tied to my neck. So I'm like, it didn't even come untied. And I'm sitting in the bathtub, like drinking wine and, listening to some sappy music or something. And I remember, dude, I look in the mirror and I have purple marks, like deep purple all over my neck. And I'm like, man, what did you do? But something hit me at that point. And the reason I share this story is because it was such a huge turning point. As far as at that point, I knew two things. One being that there was a God. There was something conscious that was up there that was aware of me outside of me. Like, I was like, there is definitely something. I already believed in the spiritual, but I thought it was just like, just another dimension. And we're all us, but in another dimension as well. But I was like, at this point, I knew, oh no, there's something that was like above me, that knew me, that saw me, that like protected me. And then two, there was a reason. Like, there's a reason for my life. I don't know what it is, but at that point I knew there's like a destiny. There's something saved me for a reason, and I have no idea why. And so after that point, like, the idea of suicide was pretty much crushed in my life. However, drug addiction, mental illness wasn't. And so from, I think it was 2021, something like that. From that point until I was 23, it just got darker and darker and darker, really. But again, I'm always pressing into this spiritual side of life and trying to figure out why I feel so stuck. And then I ended up doing a year and a half in jail. I had, gave drugs to this girl. She overdosed. I call the ambulance. She wakes up. They give me, distribution charge. And at that point I was 23, I think. And so I get locked up for a year and a half, and I at that point life hit me, like, in the sense of like, all right, dude, something's got to change. And so I'm like, at this point I'm radically trying to figure out how I'm going to live differently. Like, I'm very intent on change. And so I was like, man, I don't know what to do. I've done everything as far as, like, I did all the spiritual stuff that I knew of. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. So I get out and I'm just like, all right, just stay off the heroin, like, just stay off the heroin. And I think that you'll be good. And so for the next
It's a
11
good
months,
step in the right direction.
yeah. And it's funny because, like, when you're actual, like, when you're in addiction like that, your like your goals are, like your bar of success is very low, so it's like, I just wanted to not do heroin. To me, it was like, I'd just get drunk on the weekends, just hook up with girls, and that would be my new thing. So anyways, I do that.
Well,
And
but I think there's probably a really strong thing there, which is that focusing on that, like, small step, right? Focusing on that small first step of, okay, I'm just not going to do heroin. And
yeah.
then it seems to me, and we haven't gone through your story, but then it's like adding like that next little step that will kind of take you to where you're trying to go.
Yeah, I think, and that was the mindset I had of like, just don't do this and then things will work out. Just don't do, you know what I mean? And that was what I was thinking. And it worked in part. It did. It worked in part. I started going to like a church, and like, I didn't really have any faith or any belief. I just like went because I was like, man, I'm just trying to like do something different, And so I was just trying to do things differently. I got on Suboxone, I tried to pick up drinking, it wasn't my thing. but that was really it. And I started slowly building my life back in the sense of like I moved out of my dad's and got a basement. I got my restricted license, little things that were big accomplishments at the time. And so I'm feeling good. Like, man, my life's starting to come together. But the other thing was that I was, I'm still a drug addict. Like you know what I mean? Like I'm always finding loopholes to be a drug addict. And what I mean by that is I'm going to the doctor now to get Xanax. And so now I'm not taking heroin, but I'm taking Suboxone and Xanax and blacking out every day. And, going through weeks of life, literally blacked out, like doing things like, dude, I got this apartment and completely forgot because I did it when I was blacked out. I didn't even know I had an apartment. So I came to 3-4 days later and thought I was homeless. You know what I mean? And I didn't even, like, that's
Wow.
how, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't even know I had a
That's
place to
crazy.
live. And I'm like, dang, where am I going to go? And I was talking to my dad. He's like, Josh, what do you mean? I helped you move your bed over there. I'm like, what? You know what I mean? That's a crazy thing to like not even know you have a
Jeez.
house, bro. Like that I was just gone, just losing my mind. And so I was blacking out all the time. And then all of a sudden everything stopped. And within a matter of 3 weeks, I wrecked 2 cars, had 2 charges, out on 2 bonds, driving on suspended, a DUI. I lose my job, and then I lose my basement that I'm renting out and end up homeless. So it was like I'm climbing this hill, and then everything just crashed to the lowest low that I've had. So I end up homeless, and now I'm just
Oh my
back at the
gosh.
bottom. Yeah, and it was pretty crazy because it just felt like.
What's like your spiritual practice looking like during this whole thing? Are you meditating? Are you studying the Bible? Are you still in Buddhist? What's that looking like?
So at this point, I was going to church. I was trying to read the Bible. It wasn't working, dude. Like that lane wasn't working for me. I was trying it, but nothing was really happening for me. And but then nothing was happening in the Buddhism either anymore. It was like, cool, I get it. Like that's kind of how I felt. I was like, cool, I meditate. Like, where's the power for me to stop doing these drugs? Like, where's the power for me to actually like make better choices? It was kind of like I have all these cool ideas and these cool theories of life and the meaning of life, but it's like, what does it matter if you can't stay out of jail? Like, so that's kind of where I was at. Like, what's it doing for me at this point?
That's a
It's
good
like, it's
point.
not. Yeah, it's like it's cool to, like I could talk to, and I remember I used to have so much pride in it in the sense that like I would love to like go out with girls and drink and like talk about this deep stuff, and you know what I mean, and it was like cool, but it's not changing anything. It sounds cool, but you know what I mean, it sounds deep, but that's kind of where I was at, where I was just like I kind of gave up on it, you know what I mean, like I was just doing stuff and it's like I tried that, it didn't work. And So, I mean, at that point, though, my belief system was whatever you believe is what's going to happen. Like that was my whole belief and understanding the universe was like, whatever
Mm.
you believe is reality. Very much what Buddha said, something about, but whatever you believe, you shall be. Like that was basically my mindset on all that. And so it's just like, yeah, whatever you believe, cool. That's going to be a reality when you die. And then, so what happened though is towards when I was homeless, and by the time when I was homeless, I was still trying to stay off heroin. I was doing everything but heroin basically. Um, and what started to happen though was I remember some lady came up to me. She's like, "God said you need to see him," which was very strange. I've never had anything like something like that
Just a
because
random person?
it was a coworker, there was this Spanish lady that worked with, but she never talked to him. She just did her thing in the cut and just she never talked to anybody. And then randomly, just one day, she's just like, "Hey, God said that you need to go see him." And what was interesting about that comment was that I was going to church like 3 times a month, um, up until like 2 months prior. So I had, I was like going to these churches and then I just stopped doing that. So it was just the timing of it was like, that's kind of strange. But I'm like, yeah, tell him he needs to see me too. Like where's he at? I've been trying to get a hold of him. It's
He's
like
not picking up the
my
phone.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was crazy. But what was wild is then I went to a AA meeting, and I remember I sat down in the chapel. I said, "What's up, God? I'm here." And I opened a Bible and I started like reading it, and it was like cool. I remember I read some things. And I was like, that this stuck out to me, and it was like cool. You know what I mean? But that was it. And I went to my tent and slept back in the woods. And then I went back a week later and I opened up to the exact same verse. Like I just Russian rouletted it. and I open up to the exact same verse, and I'm like, because I don't read the Bible really. I'm like, dude, I just read this last time. What's the chances of that? And so I started to really like kind of think about it, and I'm reading it, and I'm like, dude, this is exactly what I'm going through right now, because it's talking about how the death encompassed me. You know what I mean? The chains of death ensnared me. All these things,
Do
and
you
I'm like, dude,
remember?
it
Do
was
you
Psalm
remember the
8.
verse? I could
Well,
pull it up.
it was Psalm 18. I mean, it was like the whole thing, but in the beginning, it's talking about, it's like death encompassed me. You know,
Okay.
yeah, and and so he's talking about how he basically is surrounded by death, and how he he called out to God, and God heard him and come and saved him, and so that's what it was talking about. And what was interesting is that um, at that point, I started to have a lot of supernatural experiences, in the sense of I had always had. Actually, let me reverse real quick. About 6-7 months prior to that, I remember I've never had a bad trip. Like I was faithfully every psychedelic besides probably peyote and ayahuasca I had done. You know what I mean? Like all the research chemicals, all the acid, all that stuff. I did it all, and I got to the point where I was IVing. I was getting liquid acid and IVing it, and it started to get.
Wow.
I never had a bad trip, but what happened was one night I was with my friend, and we're tripping, and I went to bed at like 6 in the morning. We're up all night, and I go to bed, and uh I wake up in a sleep paralysis, and my room is getting, and this happened like 2 months prior, the same thing. So what started happening was I started having sleep paralysis where demons were like coming in my room. And what was interesting is that every time it started happening, more and more would be there. So it was like every time I'd have these dreams, more demons, they were getting uglier. Um, and so I had this dream where like these demons were filling my room, and I'm like trying to get up because they're like coming, like looking like they're about to get me kind of thing. And so I finally wake up, I go downstairs, and my friend's sitting on the couch. He's like, dude, he's like, I just had to wake up and pray. He's like, I just had the most demonic dream. So me and him, like at the same time, we're having this like demonic dream at the same exact time. You know what I mean? It was kind of crazy. So little things like that
Whoa.
started to kind of just look at me, where I was like, dude, what is with this evil stuff? Like, because it was kind of out of nowhere. I never, you know what I mean? It was kind of like this dark stuff started popping up, and so then I had this overdose, and when I'm back, fast forward to now, I'm homeless again. This is after the lady and the Bible verses and stuff, and I had an overdose in the woods, and I go out, and in the overdose, I'm in a hallway, and there's demons on my left and my right, and I'm walking down this hall, and I'm following one, and we're walking to this big door, but I'm so caught up in like, where the heck am I right now? It was again the same thing, like you're in another realm that's just as real, if not realer than this one. I'm fully alert, like, where am I walking through this place, and I'm so caught up with where I am that I'm not thinking about what I'm doing. So I'm just kind of following suit, just looking around like, what the heck? And we get to this door, and this demon says, it says, one more step, you're almost there. And it turns around and it looks at me with a smile, like, gotcha. You know what I mean? And I remember I said, oh, hell no. And I turned around, and I woke up, and I was in a pool of sweat, like soaking wet. So that happens. A week later, I go to Pennsylvania to see my grandma. We get, I go out to the bar or whatever. I come home, and whatever. I'm about to go to sleep, and I'm sleeping with my uncle, and we were sharing like this big mattress thing, and he had American Pickers on the TV. He's already asleep. I go to lay down, and I start feeling sleep paralysis. The only difference is that this time, uh, I could feel like something was trying to get in me. It felt like I was feeling like in specific places, I was feeling like an energy and like a darkness penetrate specific parts. So I'm feeling like little things were trying to crawl in me, and I'm like this, like trying to fight them off, but I'm paralyzed. And I remember, dude, I'll never forget. I'm watching American Pickers. Have you seen that show?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
two guys that drive around in a van, and they go to
yeah,
like
yeah.
random spots and pick up a bunch of people's stuff.
Yeah, so I'm watching
Yeah.
that show, and I'm like, but now I'm in sleep paralysis, so I'm hearing the show. Next thing I know, these guys are talking to each other about where they're gonna
Mm.
go, except their voices change into a demonic like frequency, like that. You think of a typical like that low, like it changes into that frequency of speech,
Like kind
bro.
of
And
raspy.
yeah,
Like,
it changes into that. They start talking about me. They said, yeah, his name is Josh. He's from
Oh, shit.
Virginia. We had to destroy him, bro. And I'm wide awake, but I'm in sleep paralysis, so I can't get up. But I'm hearing this, and I'm like, what? And it's talking about me, and I start fighting it. Next thing I know, I shoot myself off the bed. I wake up the whole house. I don't even, because I don't hear myself. I guess I was screaming, crying. They said, my dad said, he's like, you were crying out, like screaming, like. And so I wake up everybody. They come downstairs, like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm good. I'm good. I get back in bed. Well, now this time when I go back to lay down to go to sleep, all of a sudden I'm hearing voices in my head telling me to kill my uncle. And I'm sitting here like,
Oh,
what?
jeez.
Yeah, because I'm like, what? Why am I like something's telling me kill my uncle? And while I'm talking myself out of doing it, I'm finding myself getting up and doing it. So I'm like, no, that's crazy. While I'm like climbing out the bed, I'm like, I would never do something like that while I'm going to do it. So now I'm standing over him, and the voice is telling me just crush his head, like just like as if I had the strength to do that, like just pop his head. And I'm standing over there. I start moving my hand towards his head, and he just pops his eyes up, looking at me. I'm standing over him. I can't imagine how much that freaked him out, you know. And he's like, "What the heck? What are you doing?" He gets up and he just like leaves the room. And so I go back to sleep. And so all this stuff starts happening. This is all happening very quickly. You know what I mean? Like in a short period of time, this just spiritual stuff is happening. And I'm like, what the heck is going on, dude? And I remember, I'll never forget having the feeling of like, your end is coming. That's how it felt. It was like you're about to die soon, or something's gonna radically change. That's gonna change everything. Like those are the only options. Your life is done. It's out of control. And so about a week or two later after that, I'm at a hotel. I'm going to a rehab. Doing something. Well, I'm like, I'm gonna do heroin one more time. So I get some heroin, and I'm in the bathroom. And the girl I'm with at the time I was dating, I remember she told me, she's like, just please, like, just don't, you know what I mean? She told me. And anyways, I go in the bathroom. I'm like, one more time. But I have this sobering moment. You know, there's times in life, I think, you know, and this is a little side comment. There's moments that ego death, that like humbling, where you just realize you're just like nothing in the universe, right? Like this, just that great humbling that I think everyone needs to experience. I have that moment in that time.
This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by the official Traveling to Consciousness app, available on the iOS and Google Play Store. On this app, you're going to get exclusive content, from articles to meditations to anything else that Clayton is going to put out. Here's also where you're going to find the only place to find the ad-free versions of the podcast. You're also going to be able to get the podcast at earlier dates than normal, the free release version of it. So the Traveling to Consciousness podcast app, I highly suggest that you download it, because it's the only way that I suggest that you listen to it. And what's even better is that the company is always making updates, so please let me know if you personally have a recommendation and we can get that in there. So remember, download the Traveling to Consciousness app so that you can get early releases, you can get the video format, you can get it ad-free, and so much more.
But I come to myself at like the end of myself, where I'm just like broken, and I just like so sincerely, I just said, God, I said, what do you want from me? I was like, this is all I know. I said, I'm looking at the needles, I'm looking at the dope, and I'm like, dude, this is all I know. This is all I've done for 12 years. Like, I don't know anything else. I said, I've tried to go into church. I tried doing the I'm like, I tried everything. I said, I don't know what you want from me. Forgive me. And I started saying the Lord's Prayer, and that was the only prayer I really knew from going to church as a kid. And I just started saying the Lord's Prayer while I'm tying my arm up and finding my vein, and so I say that, and then I do the shot. Well, I knew that I was an overdose, because I had overdosed like 5 or 6 times at that point. And so there's a split second of a feeling, and also there's a what's the word, intuition, right? There's like I knew I was doing too much. But there's a pride associated with addiction, where you think, oh, I'll be okay. And so anyways, I feel that, and I get up and I run out the door. Next thing I know, I'm in an ambulance. I guess someone had found me on the 3rd floor and called, and so they arrested me for having the needle and everything. And so I found myself in jail, man. And that was, I was only out 11 months. I had 8 years over my head. So I'm waking up in the jail like my life's over. I'm on suicide watch. It's just like, it was like the hell of all hells. I'm going through crazy withdrawals. I'm in this little cell. It's freezing cold. And it was almost like, for the first time in my life, all my junk was in front of me. You know, it's like all the consequences. There was no running from this. It was like everything that I had sowed into my life was just like sitting there looking at me in the cell. And it was just like, dude, I'm done. Like I'm thinking my life is over. I'm already thinking, I'm like, all right, I might get out in 5 years if, you know what I mean? Like I'm already like thinking about, I'm going to be here for 5 years probably. And I remember I just said, God, if you're real, I'm ready. I was like, I'm done with the bars. I don't even want to have sex. I don't want to do anything. I said, I just want to be a good dad. I just want to be a good son. Like, I just want to be a good boy. That's all I want. I'm done with everything. I don't like, you know, I just said, just please help me. And so at that point I started to go to a Christian, it was like a Christian, podcast or not podcast, um um mod, that's what I'm thinking. Mod pod is a mod, Christian mod. And so when I go into that, I don't know, man, I just was like, what else do I have to lose? I started to like listen to speakers, and mind you, I like a weekend I literally told my friend, I said, dude, I'm out of here, because there was one of my friends that was a good friend from the street, and I'm like, dude, this place is whack, bro. I said, I'm not trying to join no cult. I said, you know, like they're sitting here like reading scriptures and praying and all this. I said, I was just trying to find some like peace, you know. And I remember he was like, dude, he's like, it gets better, bro. Trust me. I thought the same thing, but give it some time. And I remember around that same, you know, within a few days of that, this voice spoke to me that I never heard before. It was like a thought, but it wasn't mine. It came from left field kind of, right? And it just spoke to me like and said, why don't you just try? And it challenged me in the sense of like, what else are you gonna do? Like, why don't you just try in this for once? You know, like don't just give it some your effort. So I started to listen, I started to read the Bible, I started to pray. And dude, I'm going through withdrawals for like over a month at this point. Were you say something?
I'm curious about that. I'm curious about that try, because you mentioned earlier that a couple things. Number one was that you had tried everything that
Mm.
you like had found, right? And I think at one point earlier you also mentioned how you it was something about trying, like you're trying to get better, you were calling out. So what, and maybe rephrase that if I misquoted you there, but like what was different about this idea of trying? Like, because there seems like there's something there with this voice saying, why don't you just try? And like it feels to me like you were trying before, but it sounds like there was something different with this voice.
I think it was more so of just in that place. Like, why don't you just try to apply yourself to what's going on here? It was more of a um why, like, what else are you gonna do? Why don't you just, like, here, you're here, just try to apply yourself to this, try to open yourself up to this, try to, you know, be receptive to what's going on here. And so I think that's more of what it was. Like, why don't you just try to be where you are? You know what I mean? Like, it's because I was trying to like dodge, and I'm in jail. Like, you can only go so many places, but I'm already like trying to like, oh, I'm out of here, I'm gonna go to this pod. And it was like, why don't you, like, you're here, just try to be here, you know. And instead of moving and avoiding, you're like trying to run from it. So that's kind of what it was. um but I started, you
Okay.
know, yeah, that makes sense.
Like
um
almost this like state of acceptance, like I'm here and you need to try from where you are as opposed to trying from where you're trying to go.
yeah, I think it was, but it was also towards the program, because I'm like telling my friend, like, I don't want to be here, you guys are waking me up early. So it's like, why don't you just try to actually submit to this program, just try to submit to what's going on here. And that was what it was mainly.
Gotcha.
um and so, you know, I started doing that though. I just started listening, and dude, I can't even tell, as many times as I talked about this, I can't tell the day. There was no moment. It was like, but it was over the course of like 2 weeks, where I was like reading about here. So here's the crazy thing. Right after that, there was like a time of the day where you just sit on your bunks and just be quiet, right? But you weren't allowed to sleep. It was like this hour where you just had to either read or like pray or something, right? And so I'm sitting on my bunk and I'm like, what am I gonna do? I'm still going through withdrawal, so I'm not feeling too hot. This guy comes up to me and says, hey, bro. He's like, do you want a Bible? And I'm like, sure, man, whatever, you know. So he goes and gets me a Bible, and dude, I open it up. I open straight up to Psalm 18. This is 3 times in a row. I just Russian roulette, just,
No.
yeah, dude. And I'm sitting there like, something about that
Shit.
wrecked me, dude. Yeah, like I'm like, what? I'm like, dude, there's no way that I was opened up to this. Because at this point, I already kind of knew. As soon as I started reading it, I said, oh my God, this is the same exact one, right? So that really like got my attention. And so I just said, you know what, whatever, I'll start praying with these guys. I'll start, you know what I mean? And so I just started doing it. And it was like about 2 weeks into this, I just started to feel full. Like I just, for the first time in my life, man, I just started to feel like full with peace. Like I just started to have like this acceptance to the point where like I think my life is over. I'm literally like preparing to go do like 3-4 years in prison. You know, I'm like, my kid's gonna hate me by the time I get out. I just left for a year and a half. She's not gonna know me. So I'm like, my life's, but I'm simultaneously having more joy than I ever had in my life. So I'm having all this peace. I'm going through withdrawals, but I'm also more peaceful, more just completely like not making sense. And then after that, that lasted for, a week. After that, it was like I started to change. And that was what really got my attention. I physically and just overall my heart literally just started to shift into something that I never knew before. And what I mean by that is, you're in jail, most people, they're sitting there talking about drugs, they're talking about girls and hookup stories and this and that, war stories. I would be sitting at those tables, and whereas before I might make a joke or a comment that was very much like me, or like very much something I would say, and when I would say it, it would feel like I was trying to be somebody else, and I'd be like, that's not me anymore. Like there was this shift, this conviction that I was like, and I'm looking around, I'm like, dude, these are dumb conversations. I don't want to be that anymore. And I'd be on the phone with my girlfriend at the time, and I'd be like, I don't think I want to have sex when I get home. Don't make me choose between you or God, or you know what I mean? Because you're gonna lose. Like, and I'd be saying this stuff,
Whoa.
and not even, but it wouldn't even be like it was me saying. Like it was like something in me was rising up, and I'm just finding myself just changing my desires, my dreams, everything's changing, and I'm like, what is going on? Like I'm looking in the mirror sometimes, just like, what's happening to you? You know what I mean? Like it was freaking me out. Like, but it was sincere. And then I started to notice,
And this
like, dude,
was all just from reading was this all just from reading the Bible? Was this all just from, like, meeting up with that group?
no, it was like, yeah, it was like, I mean, it was a combination of just being in that place. Like, so there's no, I don't have my cell phone. There's no distractions. Um, and it was like, instead of sitting here wasting time talking about this stuff and watching movies or whatever they're doing in the jail, playing cards, I was like, I'm just gonna read my Bible and pray, and I'm gonna see if I'm gonna try. I'm gonna see if this really does something. And it was over that time, it started to sit in me, and then a desire started to grow to where, dude, it was like I wasn't reading the Bible anymore because I had to, or it was something to do. I literally was like hungry for it, man. Like it was like something in me was like, I want to read more. Like it felt like it was just fueling me. And then the real shift came when basically I would pray, dude. And when I would pray, it would feel like I'd go and pray, and it would feel like I was tripping. Like, but it was pure. It wasn't like I was having visuals. It that like that just like bliss and joy and like stuff that I used to have on it would what it reminded me of on mushrooms and stuff, that like I would laugh like I was tripping, and I would just be filled with like so much joy, and I'd be geeking, and I would just feel that I would be like whatever, and I would pray to Jesus, and then I would feel this like wave of love just drop on me. Like it was like a cloudy weight or something would just come on me. And dude, I'd be like high for like 30-40 minutes at a time. And I was like, so that made me kept on, because I'm
Wow.
still like, yo, I like this. So I've been praying more, every time I pray, I would feel it, what I mean? I'm getting high in the
Jesus
jail.
drug.
No, I mean,
That
and that's
Jesus
really what it was
yeah.
at first, and but the thing about it was different, because I like, for me, like psychedelics and stuff, it always had something negative with it, in the sense of some discomfort before, some type of anxiety come down, something like,
Right.
right, like there was always something there that was just murky, but this felt like just a pure like shot of just like life, like, you know what I mean, like, and it was just, it felt so rich and so pure, and like, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. And so, dude, it was just after that, it was like, I took off with it. And so my life changed at that moment. Everything about me changed. I was just like, I'm all in. Um, and I just started praying for people, and I'm seeing people like cry, and like, I'm like, dude, there was stuff that was actually like happening in the natural that was like, dude, there's something to this. There's something tangible happening here. And so
Well,
after that,
real quick, I'm curious what was going on when you're talking about like praying. Like when you
Mhm.
say I was praying, was it just like you kind of like what does that invoke? Like what are you doing with your body? Are you saying words out loud in your head? Like what does that mean when you say that you're praying?
Oh, yeah, I would just pray to God. Like, it started off with just praying like for my day. Like, I'd just be like, Jesus, just thank you for, this day. I just asked that, you'd help me to be positive in this place and give me a good, it just was like I would read stuff in the Bible and then I would just pray whatever I read that day. Like, okay, well, help me have this, help me have the wisdom, help me, whatever I was reading, I'd be like, all right, Jesus, and come to him. And I'd listen to like worship songs and I would start to sing to God. And it was crazy because, man, it was like, and I'm gonna give you like a good analogy. When I got there, I remember I said I was ready to leave because I was like, they would sit up in bed at night and say like a 10-minute prayer, but it would bounce around. Like someone would read a verse and then someone would pray, right? I was ready to leave because of that. I was telling my friend, I said, this is religious, this is a cult. Dude, by the time I left, I was only there 2 months. By the time I left, I know they were getting, annoyed with me. People would be like, bro, I'm Jesused out. Because whenever that shift took place, next thing I knew, bro, I'm trying to pray for everybody all day long. Like it was like, like I had nothing better to do. So people would come drop off the trays and I'd be like, hey bro, let me pray for you. I'd be in the rec room praying and walking around there and and people thought I was crazy because me and my friend Billy would be in there, and it's like, because he's experiencing what I'm experiencing. So I'm like, dude, this is real. Like, I don't know what's happening, but I love it. And I'd walk around just like, hey, can I pray for you? Hey, can I? And so it's like people were getting tired of it because you're in this, I'm stuck in this little box with 50 guys. How many times could you ask someone to pray for me? And I mean, that was like, but to me, I was like, dude, whatever happened to me is real because why? How else did this happen? What made me come from a place of not even wanting to pray to 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, I can't stop praying. All I want to do is pray. I mean, it was just this crazy shift took place. And so, yeah.
This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by Conscious Technologies LLC. Talk about an aligned company name. This company creating technology that will revolutionize the way that humanity is able to resonate or vibrate with the electromagnetic frequency of your phone, of your Wi-Fi router, of the light bulbs in your house, of really anything. What they do is they have created these amazing minerals, amazing units that you can either place on the back of your phone, you can wear it as a necklace, or they even have like little in-house generators, if you will, that can unify the entire field of an entire house. I've experienced these things in person, and I unequivocally can tell you that it does something, and it helps you feel more present, more calm, and more connected to the spiritual dimension, if you will. And I highly recommend that you also check out episode number 034, where I actually talked to one of the co-founders, and it blew my mind away. One of my favorite episodes, where we actually get into how he creates it, why it's created. And, if this wasn't enough of a sell for you, go check out that episode because I know that it will sell you after that. Conscious Technologies LLC, harmonizing the planet one person at a time.
That's wild. And that was all just, I mean, you're saying this crazy shift, and I guess it sounds like from that act of just trying, like you were just trying and then actually praying. Like it sounds like praying was that trying for you.
Well, it was that, but it was also like for the first time in my life, I started to really check myself in the sense of like submitting things like it's like us, especially as men, like we have our way of thinking, our ways, and we want to hold on to them. And for the first time in my life, I think I was open to like surrendering, like, God, all right, this says that I shouldn't gossip. The Bible says I shouldn't gossip. Let me actually see what happens if I listen to that and don't do it anymore. So now next time I'm in a conversation and they're talking about somebody, hey, I don't want anything to do with this, I'm leaving. And it was like every time I would do one of those little things, I would feel life hit me. Like it was so crazy. It would feel like I would trade that off. Like that was the old me. I don't want to do that. I deny myself in that. And I would feel like a new joy come on me, a new strength. So that's what it was. It was a combination of like, you know what, let me actually try to do this stuff. There's watching a movie where like there's girls in bikinis. It says not to lust after women. Let me actually not do that and just try not to. And I don't want to watch this anymore. And I would feel God like, all right, good job, give me more, and I'd get more like life. That's how it was. And so it was this exchange of like, I'm gonna do what you say,
Uh,
you know.
That's super cool. Because you mentioned this earlier, and this is something that I've been reading a little bit more about lately, which is I think a little bit tied to Hinduism, which
Uh
was
huh.
Patanjali's eightfold steps. I think you mentioned that at the beginning that you had stumbled across the eightfold path of, I'm not sure if it's like to enlightenment or whatever, but he talks about in there which are called yamas and niyamas, which are the basically the do's and don'ts, right?
Hmm.
Like covetousness, be content, devotion to God, self-study, self-discipline. And that's something that I've even like looked at my life like a lot more seriously in recent years, or recent years, definitely recent years, but I'm thinking even more in the past couple weeks
Yeah.
with even just the thoughts, right? It's not even just like, okay, I'm going to act in contentment, or I'm going to act of not stealing, or I'm going to act in not being truthful, but actually focusing on that internal dialogue of, okay, cool, a Victoria's Secret model walked by. Don't, pay attention to your thoughts. Like, the being a man, the natural human animalistic instinct is to covet that, to want to
Hmm.
pursue that in a sexual manner, but then to
Yeah.
actually like bring that internal dialogue of, no, just be content. Because
Yeah.
I've even realized that the act of that desire almost leads to suffering in its own way.
Right. Right. It's one question I asked myself is like, where does this produce life? Like, what about this is going to lead me to more
Mm,
life? And in the spirit realm, your thoughts are just as powerful as your words. You know what I mean? Like in the spirit realm, you don't actually speak. It's telepathic. Um, there was there's a
right.
story in the gospel where Jesus is telling this guy, your sins are forgiven, get up and walk. And it says that people were around the guy and they were thinking he can't do that. No, he's not, right? Those thoughts, and the Bible doesn't say this, but this is the one of the revelations behind it is that those thoughts were touching that guy. What you think about people impacts them whether you know it or not. You know what I mean? Those thoughts still send out a frequency, or they send out an energy that impacts people. And so that's why, and then Jesus says again, he says, I say to you. So he basically is saying whatever you're receiving from them, because he was listening to those thoughts. He says, I say to you, get up and walk. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, I think, and like you said, it's like that is really the one of the next levels. It's like there's so many levels to this, and that is one of the higher levels, is getting of reining your mind, ruling your mind to not think those things. And not just, not, it's not just about like, oh, I didn't do it, but you thought about wanting to do it, for an hour kind of thing. It's like you already basically did it, you know what I mean? In a sense, you spiritually, in a sense, agreed with it for a while.
And I think, and I mean, maybe correct me if I'm wrong here, but this could also be an allegory to, I'm sure, I think Jesus said it, but something about along the lines of, ruling the kingdom within, right? Or
Hmm.
the kingdom of God is within all of us, right? Is having that domain over your own internal being, whether it's your spirit, whether it's your mind, and then, actually being in control of it. It's like, we always talk about how we're creatures of habit. And
Hmm.
so many people want to develop habits in this natural world of lifting, or of not doing drugs, for instance, but actually becoming the the almost the god of your own thoughts, or being the ruler of your own thoughts, and watching them
Hmm.
like a gracious king, almost, of saying, okay, like that's a common thought that we should appreciate, or move into a more aligned way. And even in your story, it's like move it more into an aligned way of Jesus, or the way that the Bible is showing us a way to align this with almost a higher power, or a more blissful happiness.
Yeah. 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 No, I think, I mean, like even that idea, like Jesus is within, or the kingdom is within. I think that it is we become essentially in the kingdom, you become the new Eden. Like the Bible talks about us being the temple. And so it very much so is
Mm.
maintaining this vessel, so it remains pure, so it remains holy, because that is the our soul is the filter for our spirit. And so it's like, that's why Jesus is always talking about, like, what, as a man thinks, so he is in his heart. As what comes out is what's in the man. Like, it's like, what I bring into me is it, that itself is not what's defined, but what it does to my soul is going to defile me. And my spirit can only flow as pure as my soul is, because it's like, for example, if I was using this actually this morning in a prayer talk, if like, let's say I take a Bible scripture and I have 10 people say that scripture, the word of itself, the scripture itself has life, potential life in it. It has life in it, but the vessel that speaks it can determine how much weight it has. Because if my soul is tainted and impure, like, some people walk around just harboring, bitterness or hatred. It's like, you could say that word and it might be a life-giving word, but because it passed through a soul that's not healed, or because you're not in a place of love, the word's not going to have weight to it.
Right.
And so I think that's what it comes down to, is our spirit, in Christ, is already built. It's already there, and it's getting our soul to align and to come into connection with what's already done in the spirit. You know what I mean? And so within the Christian belief, like, that's salvation. Your spirit is saved. Like, you come, you believe in Jesus, that he died for your sins. He did what he says he did. Your spirit's taken, but now your soul is going through that process still. You know what I mean? Of being renewed. And so part of that is maintaining our vessels properly,
Right. In a way of almost purification. And it
Mm-hmm.
seems like that's a huge thing that we're even doing here, like on this, on this earth, is to have that purification process. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole. I think I'm enjoying that part of the conversation, but I also want to get to like finish your story before
Yeah,
we
yeah.
kind of dive back in, because I do have a lot of questions about the story so far. But I think that, like, we kind of cut off the reincarnation conversation. I think it's something that if we see your whole story and then we're able to kind of go back and look at it
Mm-hmm.
piece by piece, to kind of just from a curiosity perspective, because I'm also interested to see how you even visually see your own story. Because again, right, like Buddha even said, as you see it, so it is. Or I think you
Mm-hmm.
said Buddha said that, but I'm probably misquoting that. But case in
But
point,
it's something like
let's
that,
kind
as
of
you
get
think in your
through the
heart.
story,
Yeah.
and then we can.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
so yeah.
yeah. So where are we at? Yeah.
So a
Go ahead. We
story
got
we
a
get
little
I get
delay
out.
here.
No,
Is
yeah, I
okay.
know. It's all good. Um I get out of jail in 2017. Literally the day after Christmas. And so I'm going to a halfway house in Maryland. And at this point, I'm on fire for God. My life has been changed. I'm like, dude, I'm a whole different person. I'm free from addiction. Like, I'm believing, like, I'm not, like, I don't believe in this whole, like, oh, I'm an addict, I'm always gonna be addict. Like, no, I'm free. I'm not, it's as if I never was an addict. That's how, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just a new person, but I'm like, all right, I know there's some ground to cover here. Like, now the test is really starting. This is the first real life is coming now, and you need to be prepared, because in the past,
Right,
it's
in
easy to
jail.
yeah, it's easy to
Yeah,
get
in
there
jail
in
you're cut
jail.
off.
Exactly. But I already knew. I'm like, God, keep me, because I know the devil, the pressures, the distractions are coming. And so I basically just stay in that bubble, that cocoon of, like, the same way that I was in jail. I just carried it out to the world, to where I'd come home from work and I'd literally run to my prayer room, because it was like, I could feel that the world, like, pulling on me. And I'd, like, run in my prayer room, and you know what I
Mm.
mean? I remember for, like, a first, like, week or two, bro, I literally prayed. I was like, God, just take me. I was like, I can't be here. Just take me home. Like, I just want to come be with you. I don't even want to, like, it's just, I don't know. It's a weird place, but I manage, right? So I get through it. I'm growing in my walk. I get a job. I'm doing this thing, and basically, I started being a street evangelist. I mean, I take this gospel of Jesus and this praying for people that I was doing in the jail. I started doing it everywhere. I'm like at my job, I'm working at Starbucks, I'm doing it with my coworkers, I'm praying for my coworkers, telling everyone about Jesus. I'm this new, born again, zealous, and it's so funny to me because I'll never forget I had a coworker that was like, he was like a real big like atheist, like he just really didn't believe in anything. And I remember he would tell me, he's like, dude, I don't know why I like you. Like he was like, I normally hate people that are like you. You know what I mean? And it was because he's like, dude, I hate people that do what you're doing. And it was so funny because I remember telling him like, yeah, I know, I did too. You know what I mean? Like, I was like, dude, I hated what like the stuff I'm doing. I don't know why this is happening. I'm telling you, bro, this really happened to me. And it was so funny to just see that. And so, I mean, I'm going through that, and I basically put everything on the back burner. It was like, you know what, Jesus, my whole life is yours. I'm gonna dedicate my whole life to you. And so, to save a little time, this went on. I ended up coming back to Virginia, getting, go to
No,
court.
we got time though. If it's a good
Okay,
part,
no,
if it's a good
yeah,
part of the
I don't know how
conversation, we
much
could
you want.
dive in.
Okay, and so yeah, I'm going doing this.
If you feel like it's necessary to the story, then let's dive into it.
Yeah, no, so basically this, I go down this road though where I'm basically like, I don't care about jobs really anymore. I don't care about my life plans. And my life literally became, I was living at a halfway house. So my rent was like $150 a week, very cheap to live at. So I was literally working just enough to pay rent. I didn't have custody of my daughter at this point. I'm on my own. It's just me. And so I was spending my entire day praying in the Bible, just loving it. And then I'd go out every day and I'd go and talk about Jesus and pray for people. And I started pressing into, healing and stuff. And I started seeing, I started having words of knowledge. Like I started to like go to people and know things about them. And I started to, and I started to pray for people and see like things get healed. I saw, and it wasn't something where I was like every person every time, but I just started to press into that and just believe for it. I started to see things happen here. So in my heart, my faith is like building just even more and more. And I'm just going after, like, Jesus talks about that we'll do everything he did. You know what I mean? That these signs will follow those that believe. And so I'm like, well, I believe, and I'd start doing it. And man, I just started to see, at this point I did like a 35-day fast. And after this fast, something opened up to where my spiritual eyes started to open, and I started to see demons come into my room. And so like I'd go out and pray for people. My whole day would be like praying, and then I'd go out and pray for people and come home. And I started to see demons come into my room. My roommate, he'd be like next door having sex with like prostitutes and stuff, right? Like he'd just be bringing home women every night. And dude, I would see like he would be doing what he was doing. I'd be praying and hearing that. And then like next thing I know, I would see demons start coming through my walls. So it was like my whole world shifted into a whole new thing. So I'm starting to see stuff. I would be in bed at night, and one example, I remember I felt, because the way sleep paralysis would happen, I'd never forget that feeling in the atmosphere. That would start to happen in real life. I would feel that stuff come into my house. I'd be fully awake. And I'll never forget one night I'm laying there. I feel that come into the room. Dude, I felt literally my bed tangibly went down. Something lay next to me in my bed, and I started to hear nails. Like you hear like that nail sound, like scratching on my sheets. Like, so I'm hearing something scratch, like, and I'm fully awake, so I'm like, the spiritual world is becoming connected to the real world. And I'm just, so my faith is just at this point, like, dude, I'm in this thing. This is where it's at. And so I did that for probably from 2000, for a solid like 2.5 years. I had my little battles, you know what I mean? I had my girlfriend at the time, we had slipped into fornication or whatever, and so I had my little things that I would, like, my little sins I was wrestling with. But for the most part, I was really, really living this thing, you know what I mean? As far as I never wanted to be a hypocrite Christian. Like, I was really trying to live the Bible. I was really living holy. I was really like following this thing, and I'm trying to win souls for the kingdom. I'm trying to, bring healing and all this stuff. And so about 2.5 years into this, all of a sudden I started to get frustrated. And I guess it was a combination of a lot of things, but one of the main things was I felt like people weren't like what I experienced with God. It wasn't like translating to other people like I thought it would. Like I spent so much time talking to other people and preaching this God and this gospel and doing all these things, that I thought God wanted me to do. And it just felt like, I'd pray for people and it wouldn't happen for them, and the reason that weighed on me is because I'm going after people that are in addiction. I'm going after people that are homeless. You know what I mean? And so I'm like, God, why aren't they getting changed too? Why aren't they, like, why isn't nothing happening for them? And I'm thinking, like, if I just lead people to Jesus, they're going to get better. And I don't know, I started to get frustrated with that. And then I started to get frustrated with certain things in my own life that I felt like I had been praying about and not seeing, or, you know what I mean? Just my own frustrations. I just felt like I was always, as far as like my life was getting the short end of the stick. You know what I mean? Like I was like, man, I feel like I'm just steady getting like trampled on in life. And it's cool for a while. I wouldn't mind it. But then after a while, I was like, you know what? I'm a little tired of being broke. I'm a little tired of things not working out for me. I get that this whole message is a self-denial, loving others. You know what I mean? Like it's not about material things, like, but it's like, all right, well, I'm a little tired of, so I started to get frustrated with certain things. And then I remember I started to think about psychedelics, specifically mushrooms. And I said, I really got a lot of wisdom from them. I really gained a lot of insight into the world on them. I really felt like I connected to the spirit realm on them. So I started to think about all the positives that I thought they brought to my life. And I started to kind of sit there and think, something feels like it's missing. And it wasn't a sense of, is Jesus real or not? It was more of like, maybe there's more to this than I thought. Maybe there's a bigger picture that I'm missing. And I just kind of got tired of like church at the time. I just got tired of these things. And it was like, man, maybe there's more to this. And so I said, oh, I got it. I got an idea. I said, what if I take the mushrooms now that I'm sober, now that I'm like in a healthy emotional state, now that I'm like in a good place? I said, I bet you if I took mushrooms now and like used them to connect to Jesus, it would be really cool. I'm thinking like, worst case scenario, my spiritual eyes are pretty open. Yeah. So I'm like, worst case scenario, maybe I go do it and I find out I shouldn't have done it. And then I like repent and don't do it anymore. Like worst case, nothing, just like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, And I'm like, man, I'm like, all right, that sounds cool, but I'm still scared of that because, right, like first off, I came from addiction. So for me, any substance or anything is like, no. And I'm also like, man, that could really be like, I'm like, I don't want to open myself up to something. Like I take this stuff serious as far as like opening doors and stuff like that. Spiritual powers are a real thing. And so I'm weighing on it, but then I find this video on YouTube talking about, there was some belief, I guess some early Christian, group thought that manna was like mushrooms. And so like, I didn't go super deep into it to like get all the details, but I watched this one like 30-minute little video on YouTube about it. And it was just enough to kind of plant that seed and water that seed of like, maybe this is true. Maybe I should try this out. You know what I mean? And the other part was, I didn't like that there was like fear associated with it. Like I don't like fear. I don't, you know what I mean? If there's like fear in front of something, I kind of just, the part of me just wants to kind of knock that down, whether it's confronting it or figuring out where it's attached to.
This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by Buzzsprout. And now this ad is for any of my fellow podcasters out there, or even if you're starting to think about a podcast or creating one, a key that you need to know is that you got to put your audio somewhere. Then you need someone or something to distribute that audio. And Buzzsprout is by far the best option that I have found to get your audio put out on all of the mainstream directories like Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon, Google Play Store, all of them. iHeartRadio, you name it. I have been able to be featured on over 18 different podcast platforms because of how easy Buzzsprout makes it to integrate and host your audio on these sites. And honestly, I think I'm hosted on even more than that, but that's all that they'll tell me is it's over 18. And they have great software to track where your episodes are being downloaded, how many downloads you're getting, and so much more. Guys, I highly recommend it for anyone who is starting or interested in starting a podcast. So please go check the sponsors, a link down in the bottom of the show notes. Scroll down once you get there, go to Buzzsprout, click on the link, and I want you to start your podcast, because we need more. It's amazing. Buzzsprout, podcast hosting made easy.
All right, sorry about that, guys. Had some technical difficulties, but Joshua, where were we in the story?
So, okay, so I was getting frustrated. You're a lot clearer now. Your video was kind of blurry before.
Oh,
but so things are getting to where I'm like, all right, I think this might be a good idea. And there was fear with it, which I didn't like. So it kind of made me want to do it more. But again, there was a fear of God to where I was like, I don't know if I should, cross this boundary. But anyways, months pass. I don't really think much about it. I just keep going down, but I'm getting frustrated. Like, I can't ignore my frustrations anymore at this point. I'm like, dude, I'm done with this. I basically gave my life to this thing for the last 2.5 years. I put my, jobs, my dreams, everything on the back burner to follow this God. And I don't feel like I have anything to show for it at this point. That's kind of how it felt like. It's like, but I was also like, well, dude, look at your life. Like, you know what I mean? You got custody of your kid back. You're married. You have your car. Like, you know what I mean? I'm counting all the pluses, but I'm like, yeah, but I started to feel like I wasn't genuinely happy in it anymore. So I felt like I needed to do this, I guess. And so, the day presented itself a few months later where I was at a friend's house and I was going to go make music over there. And he was one of my friends that older friends. And so I knew he was still selling weed and, he was still doing what he was doing. And I would just go over there and make music, and I would try to just be like a positive, person to him. And I kept the friendship alive, with certain boundaries. And, so I knew that stuff was going on over there. And so I went over there one day and he dumps out this backpack and has the whole backpack's filled with little mushroom chocolates. And he knew that I wasn't doing that stuff anymore, so he was kind of joking more so than he was like, here bro, and threw me one. He's like, here, take one, eat one, kind of thing, joking. And I was like looking at him and I was just staring at him. I was like, you know what? I was like, it's either now or never. Like, it's the opportunity presented itself. Either you're going to take it or not. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. I said, I want to get this wrestle match in my head about this stuff out of here. I said, I'm ready to do it. So it's all right. So I ate like 1 or 2 blocks, like a gram of it. And I said, nah, so I ate the whole thing. I ate the little eighth chocolate. And so I'm sitting there for like 20 minutes. We're chilling, listening to beats. And mind you, so I have a lot of history with doing these. So I already know, like, I'm putting myself in a good, mindset. I'm listening to music. I'm chilling. I'm in a place I enjoy, or, with people I trust, whatever. And I'm like, I'm feeling good. I'm not even like, not worried. I'm not fearful really. I'm just enjoying the moment. And at about 20 minutes in, my friend is like, texting friends. He's like, hey, I'm about to go to the bar. These guys want to go to the bar. You want to go to the bar? And I looked at him. I'm like, you think I want to go to the bar right now, bro? Like, I just did this thing. You know what I mean? I was like, I'm trying to make music and chill or vibe out, whatever. And he's like, I mean, if you want, you could like stay here and I'll go. And I was kind of like, I mean, all right, I guess, but I'm not going nowhere. So I was like, cool. So he gets up and leaves. I don't know another way to explain this. Like, I'm trying to think of any type of analogy in a movie or something, but like, I'm sure there's one out there. I just can't think of it. But when I tell you that I felt like I got set up, it was like when he got up to leave, it was like my spiritual sense, like the veil was lifted in the spirit, where it was like he was a puppet almost. It was like he was doing stuff and like put me, like presented this position, and this whole thing played out where he was used as a vessel to make it occur. So whenever I seen him get up, it was almost as if like I was seeing him like, your job is done. And it was like, in the spirit was like, they're like, all right, your job's done, get out of here. And he got up and like just walked out. And I remember as soon as he walked out the door, I'm still sober at this point. Everything, like, I, you know what I mean? I'm not tripping. I'm not anything. I'm aware. And as soon as he walked out the door, the same way I felt demonic presence enter, for the years prior and all these demonic encounters, that frequency, that presence, that energy enters the room like a cloud. And I go, oh no, I know what that is. Like, I'm like, oh, that's here. And I'm like, man, I was like, I know what this is. Like, I know what that is. I know that feeling. So I'm like, oh man. But I'm like, because I'm like split in two where I'm like, oh man, you're tripping. This isn't good. You're about to start tripping. But I'm also like, you know what? Nah, I got this. I know how to control my mind. I know how to control my spirit. Like, it's not happening. I said, they're not going to infiltrate this time. Right. So I start praying. I start ignoring it. I'm just like getting myself like in a good mindset. I'm getting loose with it, whatever. But I can't ignore it. It's like, someone just stand there. You seen like, Hey Arnold, that guy standing behind Helga all the time. It's like, that's how it felt. Like, it's like, I couldn't ignore it.
Just
So I'm like,
creeping
oh
over your
man,
shoulder.
yeah. I'm like, that's really here right now. I'm like, man. So I go in the bathroom and I'm going to give myself a pep talk, those mushroom conversations in the mirror, it's like, so I go and I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, Josh, you got this. I'm like, you took mushrooms. You're all right. I said, you can't die from this. Like, I'm giving myself, and I laugh and I'm like, this is cool. You're fine. And I give myself this little like comforting laugh. And when I turn around, dude, I hear God's voice speak to me and say, who said I can't stop your heart whenever I want? And this wasn't in a condemning way. This was a checking my pride way, as far as like, what makes you think that like you can't die at any moment for any reason? Like, like I'm like, have you seen like 1,000 Ways to Die? It's like, what do you mean you can't die from this? Like, yeah, maybe like, it was checking that. Like, who says that I can't take life from you just like that right now for no reason, whatever reason? Like, it was that.
Right.
It just checked my pride where I was like, oh crap, I could like die right now. What am I saying? I can't die. I'm like, I really could die. And then I'm like, dang. And then it's starting to hit me. I go back in the room. It's like the devil's just sitting there waiting for me. So I just feel myself encircled with death. I know the feeling. I look over on the wall. There's like a pentagram on the wall that like some art thing someone drew. So I'm like, dude, what am I doing here? You know what I mean? But I start praying. I'm like, you know what? This isn't happening. So I start praying and I'm like, I'm feeling okay, but I still can't ignore what's around me. And so I started saying like, God, forgive me. And I'm like, I shouldn't have taken these. And I'm thinking in that moment, like, all right, it's just going to stop or something. But then it hit me like, dude, what are you thinking? Like, you just got on this roller coaster. Like, you're not even like 45 minutes into this thing. These things are just about to start kicking in. And so it kind of put me in a place of like, oh man, what did I do? Like, I don't think I want to do this right now. I don't think I want to do these anymore. But I'm like, I'm still committed because I know, like I know how they go. So I'm like, well, I have to commit to being positive and to overcoming this. I'm not gonna let fear take control. I'm not right. So I'm like doing all that. I'm praying, but I just can't ignore it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, all right, I need to get out of this place. I'm like, you know what? If I get out of this place, it'll get better. This atmosphere is not good for me. I need to get like my house somewhere comfortable. That'll make it better, right? So I call my wife. She's on the way home from like dinner in the city or whatever. And I'm like, yo, you need to come get me? She's like, didn't you drive? And, I'm like, look, just come pick me up, please. She doesn't know what's going on. So when she gets there, like 20 minutes later, by the time she gets there, I'm like starting to feel my spirit, my soul get like pulled. It's like it felt like something was like this strength, this power was like pulling my spirit, separating me from my body. Like it was like this gravitational pull. And that's the best way I can explain it. I'm feeling myself like get pulled into another dimension, but I'm like staying in this one. And so she gets there, I get in the car and I'm like, dude, at this point I start like having trouble breathing. Like I start feeling my breath starts getting thinner and it's like harder to breathe. And I'm telling her like, just pray. She's trying to have a conversation. I don't know, like you've been around people that are sober when you're tripping or something. It's like we're in two different places right now and they're trying to just have this normal conversation. And I'm like trying to relay to her what's going on, but I can't. Like I'm not in my physical body almost to relay it. So it's like I'm like coming back and forth almost to explain what's happening to her. And all I could say at this point is that I just felt like it was harder to breathe, to the point where she's like, "Are you okay?" Like, because I'm gasping for breath. I'm like, like, and I'm not having like a panic attack. Like, I'm literally like feeling my breath get pulled from me. And I'm like, dude, I'm getting pulled in and out of this place, and it was a void. It was like I'd get yanked out of my body and be in this like this black abyss void, and then I'd be back in the car. And it's like, if you like astral projected or something, it's like there's a cord connecting, so it's like you're out of your
The
body,
silver
but you're
cord.
aware of your. Yeah, there's this. So I know, like, I could come back and forth, but I couldn't stay in this realm. Like, it was like something greater than me was pulling me back. So I didn't have much say, but I had enough say to like come for a second and like say something. And so it was this weird thing. But then by the time we get home, I'm like having trouble breathing. I'm like, dude, I just need to get home. I just need to get home. Like, in my mind, I'm like, as soon as I get home, everything will be better. So I run into my house and I just throw myself on the floor. And at this point, it was like fully just gone. So now I'm in the spirit, and I'm like in this black abyss, this like outer darkness, this void, just floating. But there's all this fear, and there's this discomfort I still am like, I can't breathe very well. And it was just like, dude, what did I do? Like, it was just so like in my mind, like, dude, this wasn't a good idea. And but I didn't know what's going on. And the next thing I know, it was like, I don't know, you see like a movie like where it starts fading in to the light or something. All of a sudden, it's like it starts fading into this view, this image. And before me, I'm in a hand. I'm laying in a hand. I look, and it's like, because I see like these big, like if it was a little whatever was in a hand, I see these big fingers, like I'm cupped in this giant hand. And I'm like, what the heck? And then I look over, and there's just a bunch of demons. And it's like all the demons that I saw in that, I gave you that story of when I overdosed. It's like there was like 20, 30 demons on my left and my right. It was like all these same ones. And they're different sizes. There's bigger ones, there's smaller ones. They have these grins on their face. Um, it was just like these evil things. And one of the bigger ones is like stands up and kind of takes this place of authority. And he says, and he says, we're tired of this kid. And I look over like what he's talking to, and what he's talking to is like this giant kingdom tower. It was like a tower of light, and it was like I couldn't even see the top fully, and I couldn't really see the bottom either. It was just these light, and it was like separated by different lights kind of thing. And so it's talking to this thing, and this kingdom tower. And it says, we're tired of this kid. They said he keeps coming to our kingdom and taking people out. And then he came back and ate off our table. Right then and there, I knew and understood everything that was going on. It was this sense of understanding that I knew better. It was this sense of understanding um that I really was playing with light and dark. Like, as far as I'm in this world, I'm preaching Jesus to people. I'm preaching, what I mean? I'm going into the domain of darkness, if you will. I'm going into drug addicted territories and all this stuff. I'm casting demons out of people and pulling people to Jesus, kind of thing. And now I'm like coming back and eating off their table. That was essentially what they were saying. Like, he's partaking in something that is not for your
Is that
people. Is
shrooms then?
based. That's how I took it. Yeah, 100% was how I took it, was because that was the only thing I could that was the only thing I could think of. But it was also, what I mean, but that would also be tied into, and it wasn't in this situation, but now looking back, what I mean, the few times that I drank in this time period, what I mean, and got drunk, or tipsy, whatever that comes to mind, what I mean. And I'm thinking every time that I partook in anything, I'm like, this is what I'm doing, really. That's what it was. The picture was being painted like, this really is what you're doing. Like, you're eating from a fruit that's not producing life. You're eating from another kingdom, and then you're coming and opposing this kingdom. You're coming, you know what I mean? It's like you're cripping blood and going and gang
Right.
banging on a blood street, and then coming back and trying to buy mangoes from them or something. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what it was. It was like, oh, I really was like going in another kingdom, causing issues. And then I came back and took from their food, basically. So yeah, it was definitely the mushrooms that they were referring to in this moment. And so at that point, it hit me like, oh man, I really did mess up. And the first thing that really hits you is like, dude, like you're not gonna go to a hospital or like what? Like, there's no need to call. This isn't like I'm in a spiritual thing right now. There's like nothing in the world that can just like, hey mom, come pick me up. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? Like,
In
hey,
the
I got $1
material
million.
world.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
like
material world's not
that
doing
world
it.
ain't. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I'm like, oh, this is a real spiritual like world. Like, there's nothing. And then it was like, I'm in a little hand right now. I'm, you know what I mean? Like, I can't do anything either. What am I gonna do? You know? And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I really am helpless. As far as I put myself in this, it's like I opened this door. So it wasn't even like I could plead ignorance or something. It was like, oh no, I did this. I'm responsible.
This episode of Traveling to Consciousness is brought to you by Revive CBD. Now, I know what you're thinking. Another CBD product? And typically, I would completely agree with you. I've gone through all my trials and tribulations with CBD products, but this CBD cream is unlike anything else. Honestly, I don't know what it is, but there's something in the technology of it that it helps absorb into your skin and actually get to the place that aches and soothes your muscles almost instantaneously. It's close to instant. It's probably about a 5 to 10 minute activation that I've noticed, but sometimes it goes a little bit quicker. And so I know it can be difficult for find the right one. And this was my personal favorite that I found after long enough. I don't want to go back to that dark time, but I found it. It works amazing. And the creator of it is an incredible guy. So I highly recommend you click the sponsors link below, click on the Revive CBD tab, and get yours today. Revive CBD. Feel better, live better, all premium, all natural CBD products.
And so it was that sense hitting me. And so then basically I was having a hard time breathing still. Like, it was this feeling of fear, knowing if I got dropped from this hand that death was going to take me over. It was just all this stuff was coming upon me. Like, fear it's like a jacket. Everything's living in the spirit. So it was like a jacket of fear coming on me. It was like a jacket of despair, hopelessness. Like, all these things were going on all at once. And it's feeling extremely, extremely more than real. Like, it is way past real at this point. This is way past hallucinating, like, oh, the wall's melting, and it's way past this. It's like we are in another dimension. This is playing. I mean, like, even when I did DMT, it's like a world unfolded before me. But with this situation, I got taken to another world. And it was like, and I had eaten like 9 grams of mushrooms before and didn't have anything close to this type of, visual or experience. So I'm like, dude, how? And I'm laying there, I'm having trouble breathing. And, I tap back into my body a couple of times to basically talk to my wife, because she's freaking out. She's like, what do I do? She's seeing me, I guess from her perspective, she was telling me that basically, I'm gasping for air. She doesn't know what to do, because I'm telling her, just pray, don't worry, like, just keep praying. And then I'm going back out, I guess. So basically, this goes on. I'm filled with like all these feelings of regret, but I'm thinking about basically, what do I do? I've already told God, hey, forgive me. I've already said to cry out for mercy. This is going on for, we're into a couple hours now where I'm just in this hand, because they're having a conversation that I can't hear. So it's like they present this case, and then there's a conversation where I'm like, while they're talking, I can't hear what's going on. It's like I'm going through all this torment and almost like a shadow of hell, and while something is occurring between angels and demons. And so
Kind of sounds like a
in the
jury or a trial.
Yeah, no, yeah, it was definitely a court case. It was a court case of heaven. So it's like, and the Bible talks about it. So it's like, it's crazy when you start thinking about Bible scriptures while, like, I'm in this place and these Bible scriptures are coming to me, like, holy crap, this is a real place. Like, oh, this is metaphorical, but it's real. Like, this is, you know what I mean? So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. And but I'm sitting there, and at this point, I know that the reason God had me in that place for so long of despair is because he was letting me feel the weight of my consequence. You know what I mean? It was like, because I already had let go and surrender. I did it like multiple times before I even left my friend's house. I said, you know what, God, I surrender. I know you're good. Forgive me. You either forgive me or you don't. It wasn't getting better. There was this sense of, you need to fight for yourself, in the sense of, like, when I would just let go and just surrender, I would feel the breath like start getting pulled from me. And so in that place, man, it really did feel like if I stopped praying or stopped like asking God to help me, I feel like maybe I really will die. Like, I mean, and I don't know if I really, it would have been a physical thing, a spiritual, I don't know, but it felt like, I mean, I remember whenever I did DMT and you feel the life leave you, like your soul, if you really do go through that like sense of death, it felt like that, but in a much more radical way, I guess, in a much more real way. And so I'm going through all this stuff internally and just like, what do I do? You know, what's gonna help me? And so I started to basically think at that point for the first time, I started to really think about my life at the time and everyone else that it's connected to. I started to think about my children. My wife was pregnant, and I started to think about like purpose and destiny. And I started to think about like, man, other people, not in an arrogant way, like I'm supposed to like help other people. Like other people need me, like my kids need me, my wife needs me. And I started to think about all that. And I'm like, man, God, other people need me, my kids need me. I'm like, you know, save me, like help me for that. It's not just for me. Are we good?
All right, guys, we're back for segment 3. We had maybe like a 15-20 minute little intermission there, so we're gonna get back on track. For you, is probably only a 15 to 20 second intermission, but we were just at the cliffhanger of the story. Joshua, you were, I think, in the hand, and you were basically in this state where your now wife, your girlfriend at the time, was praying for you. You were on the ground, and I think that's where you left off. Remind me if I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, it's around there. So basically my, you know, um I'm praying and I started to basically include purpose. I started to include other people, and I started to shift my focus to like the value of my life for the sake of others. And realize like I'm not here just for myself. Like none of us are here for our own sake, you know what I mean? And so I started to realize that. And when I started to kind of relay that to God, I up until this point, God was sending me breaths. I mean, it was like that was probably one of the most crazy parts of it, was I was realizing that even every breath I get was like consciously being given to me. It was like I'd be empty, and I was feeling my organs shrivel up. I was feeling like life leave my body, knowing there was no amount of water I
Wow.
could drink to hydrate. Like it was just like I was feeling myself like if you put salt on a slug, that's how I was feeling internally, externally, like just life just shriveling out of me. And then I would get a breath sent to me. And from the top of that tower I was talking about, it was like a breath would come, and I'd and it was like, oh man, those breaths were so rich. You know what I mean? Like catching those breaths were like, and then I'd have to release it and I'd feel that emptiness again. So anyways, I started to feel that kind of start to loosen up, like breath started to come a little easier. And then what happened was I looked and I saw like saints. There was probably like 5 or 6 like angels, saints came around me. And the Bible talks about a cloud of witnesses. They started to pray over me. They started to pray for me and kind of join with me in praying for myself. And I started to feel more strength coming to me. Like there was hope for the first time in this, you know, the last 3-4 hours or whatever it was, where I started to feel hope. And then out of nowhere, it was like everything's attention shifted, and there was a shadow of a cross that came like out of the tower, kind of towards the top. And it was like the focus of everything shifted to that, and it was, I guess, God's way of saying like he remembered the cross, what was accomplished on the cross, and what Jesus did for me and for my life. It was like all that tied together to that moment. And then at that moment, I look over and I see Jesus coming out of that kingdom tower. He starts walking out. And so I'm seeing Jesus come
Oh.
towards me, and he puts his arm around me. He says to everything, but he's looking at the demons. He says, "This one is mine. He belongs to me," and puts his arm around me. And as soon as he put his arm on me, and as soon as I was touched by him, I got sent back to my body. It was like immediately I go back to my body and I started puking my guts out, dude. Like the most intense throw up I've ever had. Like just puking and I was spent. My physical, my spirit, like everything was exhausted, like to the point where I couldn't even like hold myself up to puke anymore. I collapsed. I mean, I got whatever out of me and I just collapsed like back on the floor. I'm thinking it's over and I'm like, thank God this is over. And then right as soon as I relax into that, I get pulled back. Now when I get pulled back though, I'm in that kingdom tower and I'm walking into it basically. And now I'm seeing Jesus in front of me and he's looking at me with joy. It's like life, and it's almost like cinematic on your phone. At the backside, the background blurs a little bit. It's like this hyper focus on his face. Everything else is kind of blurred. And I'm just looking into these eyes of just love and acceptance. And so I'm acknowledging like this person's not mad at me, person's not angry, nothing like that. It was looking at me like I love you, I'm with you. And then he said to me, he said, maybe we shouldn't do that again. That was the first words out of his mouth. Maybe we shouldn't do that again. And it was almost in a like, yeah, that was crazy. Maybe, and it was, and that's kind of how it was. It was kind of like he was making a joke out of it, but it was also like, let's not do that anymore. That, you know what I mean? Like you learned your lesson. There was so much, the funny thing about like the voice of God is it could be two words, but there could be years worth of messages in it. You know what I mean? There's so many layers in it.
Oh,
And
for
and
sure.
so yeah. And so in that moment, it was like that's what it was like. It was like I saw you before you even made this decision. Like I was aware of what I saw this whole process play out. I was with you in it. You know what I mean? And it was so comforting in the sense that I knew God wasn't saying like, yeah, that was cool. It was more of like I was with you during that whole process. And I was with you in that place even. But it was like, let's not do that. I think you learned your lesson of this, right? And so I'm like, but I'm walking with him and I'm starting to pick up on the atmosphere I'm at. And like I said, there's different levels of glory and like higher dimensions of glory. And so I'm looking and I'm realizing that there was probably only one or two layers. It was like they would be separated by these films of light and like these veils. So I'd look up and I'd see that there was like a veil above me, and I could see almost, you can see through them almost, and that I knew intuitively that there was another veil above that. So there was like two veils, and then I knew like God's glory was on top of those things. But then I also knew that underneath me there was like 4 or 5 lower dimensions. So I realized I was like, he brought me to a high place. Like I'm like in a place of holiness. And I'm looking around and it was almost a sense of disappointment in the hosts of heaven. Like around me, it was this sense of just like you knew better kind of thing. Just kind of like, when are you gonna stop playing with your destiny? When are you gonna stop playing around? It was that sense of just like, it wasn't mad or anger. It was just like kind of this like, disappointment. You knew better kind of thing. This kind of like, come on. That was kind of how it felt. And then I'm still thinking about everything though. Like I'm here, but part of me is like carrying the shame of what just happened. And so I take off. I'm like, I can't be here. And like I said, everything's at the speed of thought. So as soon as I think I want to go to the lowest place in this kingdom, I go there. I take off and I travel to the lowest part. I'm at the bottom of everything. I'm on my knees, my face,
Whoa.
and I'm having this revelation that like how holy God is, how pure, like pure light, how holy it is. We don't realize like just all this stuff throughout a day that is really just so unlike him. If that makes sense. Like there's so much stuff that goes on within us, around us, that we say, the movies we watch. I mean, just so much stuff that people partake in that is so unlike the pure true light. You know what I mean? And that's what I'm coming to realization of that. And then I'm realizing like I don't even, there's this part in Isaiah 6 where Isaiah says, woe is me, a man of unclean lips. That's what hit me. I'm like, I'm not even fit to talk. I mean, that's what started. I'm like, I shouldn't be here. It was like, I'm just not a part. Like I shouldn't be here. And I said, God, just let me worship. I said, don't ever make me speak again. I don't want to talk on behalf of you. I'm not worthy to talk on behalf of anything. I said, just let me worship you. And I was just caught up in this moment of just the most pure joy of just saying hallelujah. Like I was just, hallelujah, I'm here. I'm a part of this thing. I'm just content, just loving this creator, like just loving this God. And after a few moments, maybe 10 minutes of just being in this place of like, I don't even want to leave this ever again, Jesus comes back to me and he basically comforts me. He basically tells me like, it's not anybody else I brought you there. You know what I mean? It's like, I say you're okay. You know what I mean? It's kind of one of those moments. And he kind of dealt with all that shame and that condemnation I was feeling. And it was like, then I translated back to where I originally was. And I'm just walking around with him. And this time I'm walking around like through these, you know, places of just feeling like confident about it, I guess. Like, hey, he brought me here. He's in charge. You know what I mean? Like, I know, I don't, you know what I mean? I know what I did, but he brought me here and I'm a rock with it. You know what I mean? And then next thing I knew, the next thing was I get wrapped up in this. It was almost like I was above everything. It was almost like I was in the air of heaven or something. Like I was in this bubble of revelation is the best way I can explain it. It was like just all these colors around me, just like this vortex of colors. And it was like everything I ever wanted to know in life was just flowing into me. It was like as fast as I could think it, it's like 100 different answers to everything was coming at me. Just boom, 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 boom. And so much so that it felt like I was getting filled with information, with light, with love, so much so that I felt like I was going to explode into a trillion pieces. And I started to say, stop. I started to beg God to stop. And mind you, I'm literally getting the answers to like the universe in this moment. Like everything I could ever want to know was coming to me. And I was like, I can't contain this much information. I said, stop, you're going to kill me. And Paul talks about, he says, there's things in heaven I can't talk to you about. Like they're illegal. There's revelation that could kill you. He doesn't say that, but he says there's things that are illegal for me to talk about. And I started to think about that. And I'm like, dude, I can't, it's so hard to explain some of this spiritual stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's not language for some of it. It's so hard to try to, it was like, I knew that my body, I knew this reality was protecting me from what was unseen. Like all this time, I said, send me back to my body. I don't want to see this stuff anymore. It was like it was almost like I was still too much human. It was like I couldn't contain all the information and all the life that was being shown to me. And I literally kept saying like, stop. All right, I get it. Oh my, like, but it was like, I'm caught up in a moment of like, wow and awe. But then I'm like, stop, it's going to kill me because I feel like I'm going to explode. And that's the best way I could explain it. Like I was getting so filled and it was like almost like God's love and almost like his wrath was coming all at the same time. It was like I just felt like the entire existence of creation was just getting thrown into me. You know what I mean? And it was like trying to dump 5 gallons into a cup or something. That's what it felt like. And so I said, send me back to my body, send me back to my body. Like I want this veil to go back up. That's basically where I was at, where I was like, please I want to go home. Just send me back to my body. And so I eventually started to come back to. I started like drift. It started fading out and I started finding myself back into my body. And, dude, I was scared. I mean, after that, I laid in bed for the rest of the night, just basically saying hallelujah, bro. And so the visuals, stopped. I was back in 3D realm. Right. But for the rest of the night, God was speaking to me like clear as day, dude. I mean, stuff that's happening now, he was telling me back then is gonna happen. You know what I mean? He was telling me just things, one thing after another. And so for the rest of the night, I had this open, very, very easy access to his voice. But dude, I was scared to speak for like 3 days. I mean, dude, for the next 3 days, like I really, really, people say think before you speak. Like I would meditate before I speak. You know what I mean? Like, what am I saying here? How is it representing? You know, I was shook, man. It rocked me. And so, I mean, that's the story. After that, it definitely changed my view on some things. I don't think a lot of the answers that were given, I forgot. I think the ones that I needed for now, they come to me when I need them, I think, you know? Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of the story.
I found it really interesting there where you were saying how you were like asking for the veil to almost kind of come back in between you and in this other spiritual dimension, because it's kind of almost ironic that it kind of started off with you saying, "Oh, I'm going to take shrooms, I'm going to take some psilocybin so that I can experience the other side." And you kind of got what you asked for in a sense, and you were like, "Oh shit, maybe I need to be careful about what I was asking for."
Yeah. No, dude. I mean, that's exactly. I got way more than I bargained for all across the board, and um, I mean, I wish I could find the words to explain it the best, better. But the best I can. It was just too much. It was too much. I felt like God just
That's
plugged me
wild.
into a. Yeah, it was just. I don't know. You ever feel that
What do you
like you?
think? Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking like you ever had a point like when you like laugh so much it hurts, and you're like, I want to stop laughing, but my
Yeah.
cheeks are hurting, kind of thing. That's what it felt like, but in my entire soul being, it was like, oh, this hurts. It's almost, it's too much. But it just kept coming, So
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It kind of seems like there's this feeling of, it'll be shown to you whenever you're ready, or the answer will be shown to you whenever you're ready. And it sounds like it's almost, because this feels like it still ties back into what we were talking about earlier with like the insanity, where that veil gets lifted too quickly on people, whether it's through drugs or some other mean, and it actually makes them go insane because they're not able to discern which level of truth is right for them at a given time. Do you feel like that's like a
Mhm.
fair way to interpret that?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, so the way, and this is where I stand on it is I think there's legal access and there's illegal access. And I think the way that like the spirit realm is the spirit realm no matter how it's accessed. And so the way I look at it is it's like there's a way to do something, and then there's a way to do something that has repercussions. And so I think that that's one of the dangers of just being able to take psychedelics. Anyone just like when you're 14, like I know those kids that didn't come back that really did lose their mind on those trips. I know kids that called the police on themselves and got themselves in a lot of trouble having drugs and all this. I mean, I know that those stories, and so I think there's a level of like what you're saying where you're accessing things you're not ready to handle, because like if you look at a Buddhist monk or something, it's like they spend years meditating to get into these states, preparing and growing into it, versus, hey, I'm gonna kick this door open and I don't even know down from up, but I'm here, guys. I think you can get taken advantage of. I think the spirit realm is extremely real. Things can appear as one thing and really have another intention. Things can lead you, I think, the wrong way, and I think that that's where you kind of people come back from these things and they're not the same. And I thank God that hasn't been the case for me. I mean, I really really wonder sometimes how I've maintained so much of my mind, because I know I definitely could have been somebody that really just lost it. And so yeah, I think that's what it is. Like when I look at it, like um all right, let's say like you have money, I have money. Let's say we're hanging out right now. You put $1,000 on the table, I put $1,000 on the table, and look, we both have the same money. It's just as useful. But it's like, how did you get your money? And you're like, well, I work for this business or this company. I own this company, and I work, and that's how I got it. And I'm like, well, I robbed a bank. We still have same money. It's still just as useful, but with the way that I got my money, there is consequences. There's another door
Mm,
that it was a different door, and that's how I look at it now. That's my like where I've landed at, is that there is, you can go and get information from the spirit realm, but I think the way that you go about doing it, uh, there's a good way, a legal way, and a legal way, and that's kind of how I see it.
that is interesting. How do you, because It's interesting. Whenever I started smoking weed, the part in the Bible that always kind of stood out to me, that was my internal justification if my parents ever caught me, kind of deal, was
Uh-huh.
where it says, God says in Genesis that all the sticks and all the seeds and stems of this world, or all the plants of this world, are for you to use. So
Uh-huh.
how do you view that now, given this entire earth changing, spiritually changing, life changing event, and tied to weed, like how, or not weed, but shrooms, like how do you see that culmination of like that text versus kind of how you're laying out here, right? Which I'm on board with, like this legal versus illegal, or maybe more like appropriate way of accessing this information versus taking what could be seen as a shortcut route, kind of how you're putting this out
Mm-hmm.
there. Like how, like where is that dance between, okay, all of the plant life on this is for you, but then at the same time using it to access the spiritual information is kind of off limits. Like where is that, how do you see that given this entire situation?
No, I think everyone's been there, especially anyone that's like been, smoking weed or in different things and then like becomes a Christian at least. I think we've all been there. I tried to make weed. There was a point in my walk where I tried to make it okay. Like I really did. And I probably used stuff like that to think it was okay. Um, and it's interesting because there was a point a few years ago when I kind of, I guess you could say I backslid. I kind of stepped away from God in a lot of ways, and just kind of, um, I guess like compromising certain things. And one of them was smoking weed. I was still very much like reading my Bible, praying, but there were certain things I was like, I think this is cool. I think I can do this now. And so it was funny because I would hear God extremely clear. When I would smoke, I would hear God's voice very clear, and it was like very quiet within myself. But what was interesting is that God made it really clear to me that my destiny wasn't here. It was like I love you. You're my son. It was like you still, you could stay here if you want, but like everything, all the dreams I showed you, like all the stuff that I have planned for you is up here, and you can't come up here and simultaneously stay down here. Like there has to be, you have to let go of this. And so it was interesting because God would meet me in that place, but it was never to allow me to stay there. And I remember that two things. One was I went on a fast. Like I'm a man of fasting. And I think like for one, I think that is one of the legal ways because there's a work to it. There's a sacrifice, there's a suffering attached to it. It's like taking steroids versus going and working out. You know what I mean? It's like you take steroids to work out versus doing it the longer way. It's the delayed gratification aspect of it. And so it was like I was basically on this fast, and I'm in this place of wherever I was at, spiritually. I'm in an elevated place, and dude, I smoked weed, and it felt like I just crashed a plane. Like it was the most crazy thing. I felt like I was literally walking in the clouds on Earth. And then I smoked a little bit, like literally to like 2 hits of some weed, not even really get high. And it felt like I just descended like 50 levels, bro. And I just felt my whole frequency, everything just and go down. And then I felt like I was sitting in this little shell. And I was like, yo, that's crazy. And so the way God showed it to me was like at the end of the day, these things, I don't know anybody. I know people have a medicinal thing, and I'm not going to get into all that right now, but at the end of the day, these things, at least weed, changes my mind. It's always shifting your mindset. I mean, it's just like there's no way for me. That's the way that God kind of cornered me with all this, is that two things. It shifts the Bible says to be sober minded. It shifts your mind. It changes your mind. It changes your consciousness. I mean, there's no way really around that, or else what's the point of even doing it? You know what I mean? Like, or there's no benefit in it because it's helping people shift their mindset. Um, so that was one way. And then two, I couldn't escape the fact that it's an idol. Anything that I feel like I need that's outside of myself makes me feel
Mm.
extremely like I'm in idolatry. Like if I need to take mushrooms to have a spiritual experience, that seems like idle to me. If I need to smoke weed to have peace, that tells me that there's an underlying issue that really needs to get dealt with, because these things are always just band-aids. Because if I don't, like, have you ever been around someone that's like, I have all my weed head friends, and it's like, I used to work for this guy, and dude, I mean, I'd go to his house every morning. He would take his dabs, and by 12 o'clock every day, he's starting to freak out. Like, he's just getting irritable. He's in rush hour, hand slamming on his horn. Why? Because he needed he needed his little dab. You know what I mean? His time was running out. Any
Right.
time that my sanity or my positivity, anytime my best self is attached to something else, that makes me feel extremely weak and extremely like enslaved to that thing. It's a bondage. It's like, so you're telling me I need to have that, you know what I mean? And so, and that's just for myself, it's like God, like I can't see it any other way personally, and so that's where I'm at with it.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. You definitely don't want to find yourself in a place where you're placing these external things on a pedestal, because I
Right.
mean that just gives all your power to them. I feel like I see
Yeah.
people do that all the time with certain news organizations or people or things, and that can cause so much turmoil, right? Especially whenever it's what is it? It's like when people say don't never meet your idols, and I think
Yeah.
it's a little bit disingenuous, but I think the whole cornerstone is that they're human too, right? And if you're
Yeah. Yeah.
saying you're placing everything to become this one person, it's like, well, that one skeleton or that one imperfection, it's going to shine through, and that's whenever you're like, oh shit, like I shouldn't have put all my eggs in this basket, whether it's a
Yeah.
person, a plant, anything, so I think that
Yeah.
that feels like kind of what you're touching on there.
Yeah. 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 No, I think that's 100% what it is, and yeah, I don't like that. You know what I mean? It's like I don't like that feeling of feeling like. And the other thing is, even like, honestly, God showed me this on even like the frequency level of I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, that chart where it's got the like frequency levels of like enlightenment and then like anger. You know what I'm saying? And I
Yeah, I
was
think it's
like, I
the
was
the Daniel Hawkins, the
something like
Hawkins
that.
scale.
I think, yeah, the Hawkins scale. I think
Yeah.
that's what it is. And so he was even showing me within that like, if everything has a frequency level, if everything, everything on life has a vibrational scale or something, uh that the marijuana plant, apparently it has the frequency of like 300, 350. And if you translated that to the scale, it's the place of acceptance.
Oh,
So I'm like, dude, that makes so much sense. If when I was extremely angry and I'm lower than that and I smoke, now I'm in acceptance. So now I'm like, that completely makes sense. Of course, it was
mm,
raising my vibration in that sense. But if I'm up here, I'm in fasting and prayer mode, and I'm topping out on this frequency chart here, and I know I'm walking in love and enlightenment in that sense. Me to smoke, of course it's going to feel like I just crashed my ship, you know what I mean? And once I saw that, I was like, man,
yeah.
that makes a sense. Like I've surpassed that place, and so it brings me lower. And so that when I saw that, I was like, man, that makes a lot of sense too. Because it's interesting. If I tell you I feel peaceful right now, and you say you feel peaceful, you know what I mean? Your idea of peace may be, my idea of chaos, or vice versa. You know what I mean? Like if we switched bodies and it was like, man, when you
Right.
say you feel happy, what does it really feel like? You know what I mean? It's an interesting perspective.
I always saw that in terms of love. Like that, and that
Mm,
kind of tripped me out for like a couple months, where it was like, how do I know that I'm truly feeling love? And it kind of came to me because I had talked to a couple females on the podcast who had been in abusive relationships, and it always struck me as very fascinating how people could find themselves in this relationship dynamic where there's an abusee and abuser, and both of them would say the words "I love you," and it was always interesting to me how even like the modeling of love could have been warped in their minds, of how like that energetic imprint, right? Like I'm sure like all of them today would say, yeah, that wasn't true love, but where they were in their mindset, they were embodying the truth of love in which the way they felt it. And that's kind of
Right.
remind me exactly what you're saying is like, how do I truly know that I am quote unquote enlightened? Like I feel very at peace. I feel, enlightened whenever I say things like the only thing I know is that I don't know. But how do I
Yeah.
not truly know that there's a
Yeah,
higher
yeah, yeah.
spot on that frequency?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's huge, and that was one of the biggest things that stuck out to me when I was going through my whole, born again experience in the jail was, dude, I started thinking about all those times I was on shrooms and I was geeking my face off, and I mean, I remember one time I was on acid and there's a group of us, and dude, we were talking in laughter. I mean, like my one friend would laugh and we would all understand what he was saying and laugh back. It was pretty funny, but I mean, like at those times in my life, that was like top of the game, primal joy. Like that was enlightenment in those moments. And dude, when I had this experience in jail where I was laughing like that and feeling peace and joy, I realized I was like, wow, I never had peace and joy. Like I looked at those moments and it looked like drinking creek water. It was like I was laughing just the same, but internally and externally, the it was just way more crisp and pure. It was like there was always some negative connotation with it. It felt like kind of that feeling when you're in the ocean. I'm scared of the ocean because I'm scared of sharks, man. Like I just so for me, like being out, I'll go out there, don't get me wrong,
Fair
but I
enough.
won't stay long. And like that feeling when you're out in deeper water and you feel your legs just kicking. You're like, dude, I have no idea what's underneath me right now. Like you just feel like you're in these dark, murky waters. It's like, dude, there might be a 20-foot great white right underneath me. That's kind of how I always felt. It was like, man,
For
there's
sure.
something behind this shadow that I'm not seeing right now. But I mean, it looks cool. That was kind of how it felt. And so that was one of the biggest things for me. Like, man, this joy is different. Like this piece is different. So yeah, definitely.
And I'm kind of curious, and since we're kind of touching on the idea of knowledge and wisdom in regards to, this energy, whenever it comes to, you were saying how God was basically just giving you all the answers that you were looking for and even just more wisdom than you physically could handle. Do you feel like since that experience, there have been times where, because I assume you can't, I mean, I'm not going to say you can't possibly, but I assume that you don't consciously remember every single thing that he was telling you. But have there been times since that incident where somebody's asked you a question or you've been put in a situation and you just have like this instantaneous knowing that that information was given to you in that time, but you had forgotten about it since then?
Not necessarily that it's been in that time, but I believe everything is already in our spirit. And so, like I said, it's getting our soul to get aligned back with our spirit, man. There's times that I'll say something that I know like didn't just come from me. You know what I mean? Like where I'm like, man, I didn't even really think that. It just came from somewhere
Mm,
deeper within myself. And I'm like, I definitely just pulled that out of my spirit, and I heard this one story that cracked me up where this guy, I guess this one dude was speaking and he was talking about things and things of the spirit or whatever. And he I guess he was talking and there was this, I don't know if it was some type of scientist, right? Like there's people there listening. And afterwards, this scientist guy comes up to him and he says, where did you study? And he said, nowhere. He said, I'm a preacher. And he said, well, what school did you study? He's like, where did you get this information? He said, I don't know. And he said, the stuff you were talking about, he downloaded it from the spirit, but he's sitting there like, he's like, dude, the stuff you were just talking about took me like 20 years to understand. He's like, I went to this school for 20 years to understand this. You know what I mean? And this guy's just like, I just pray, so it's like that. I mean, that's the truth, man, is it's like
that's so wild.
you, in the spirit, man, everything's available in the spirit. Everything is out there. All wisdom and knowledge is out there. You might not get like the earthly understanding of things, of knowledge and history and stuff, but understanding the mechanics of the quantum field and stuff like that, that's out there. You know what I mean, you can get access to that. And so that was a funny story to hear.
Yeah, just from like a deep meditation, you can kind of tap into that extra. It seems like there's that extra layer. So do you meditate now, or like what kind of are your spiritual practices, if you will?
No, I mean I'm a man of prayer. I'm big on praying in tongues. I pray in tongues a lot. I'll do like extended prayers in tongues for for hours. But meditation is definitely a part of my life. It's just different now. Beforehand, when I meditated in more of like the Buddhist understanding, it was like, I would just focus on my breathing. I would focus on my breath, or I'd focus on. There was this one practice I liked where you basically count your breath in, count your breath out, and the idea is to basically, you lose track of every thought. And anytime I would get any type of thought of either whether it was acknowledging a scratch I had or acknowledging this or that, I would start over. And usually you can't really make it to 10. Usually something grabs you. And so I remember there was times where
Right.
you lose yourself in the breath, and I would start to go somewhere within that. Um, and so now my meditation is more it's more just quiet, just like, and it could be different ways. Sometimes I'll read a scripture and I'll just meditate on that and just filter it through me over and over again. Sometimes I'll just sit in quiet and just be still and just be, listening for God's voice, acknowledging, and I also acknowledge my breath in the sense of breathing him in and resting in that. So yeah, it just looks, I think, a little slightly different in the sense of uh, beforehand, whether it was wrong or right, I always had a goal kind of with it. Now it's just I just like to be, and just be in a state of gratitude or whatever. So
Yeah. That's a pretty that's pretty crazy because you're actually talking about a lot of things that I'm either doing or have started doing recently. And so it's kind of cool to hear those parallels of trying of what appears to be the like there's like an underlying similarity that seems to transcend, I guess, most of the things that I've discovered, right? Because I've kind of taken this approach where I'm trying to view the landscape that exists, right? Whether it's scientific, whether it's Christian, whether it's Hindu, whether it's Buddhist, XYZ, and try to see what those similar connections are, those connective pieces. And it seems like, what you're saying, praying, kind of calling out to God, paying attention to your breath, the breath work, meditating, sitting still, all of those seem to be the cornerstone pieces of connecting to the higher power. Because it seems to me that
mhm.
everyone's, in agreement that there's a universal energy that connects all things, right? And it seems like that those are the cornerstone pieces in getting to that place of a deeper understanding or a place of higher enlightenment, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, and like I said, it ties back into really, like, I think that, like I said, the spiritual realm is still real no matter what you view about it. And so I think the ways that um, people kind of connect to it are all very similar because it functions within our body in this 3D world. Its functionality is still very similar. And so that's why I think there is definitely a lot. And like, I've wrestled with this multiple times, and I've kind of landed where I've landed. As far as I still very much like seeing the similarities. And me as a Christian, one thing that I've noticed, is that I've noticed that a lot of people in other spiritual practices seem to actually overall seem to understand the spiritual world more than most Christians, because most Christians are still filtering this Bible knowledge and stuff through the 3D. It's like they haven't got to the place where they understand how to translate it to the 5D or whatever you want to call it, the spirit. They're still stuck in the law of do this, don't do that. You know what I mean? And those things are true, but there's a spiritual reason behind them. And so it's like, I noticed that a lot of people that, like, kind of, let's say, I know people that were psychics or into this or that, and then they come to Jesus and they seem to get it really quick as far as they understand how to work with the Holy Spirit. Why? Because they understood already. They already knew how to work with spirit. They were just following a different one. They're following but it's still the same principles within getting into that door. You know what I'm saying? It's still the same avenues, I guess you could say. Um, and so that's really where I think a lot of the similarities go. I think just for me, um, I've realized that the spiritual world, I was deceived. I was encountering angel beings and light beings that I thought cared about me, but they were leading me to death. And so I think that's one of the dangers, is that the Bible gives foundational guidelines. There's something to stand on. Whereas I feel like if you're just kind of just open to whatever, it's very easy to like, how do you know you're really talking to what you think you're talking to? How do you know that, you know what I mean? Like, and it seems there's too many moving parts. And that's kind of why I really stand on the traditional, Christian faith, in the sense that, um, I think the idea of just like, oh, I don't like that. And I don't know if that's good or if that's healthy. You know what I mean? I understand why people like it. I understand why it's a thing, but just this whole idea of, oh, I don't feel like that. I don't like that part. It's like this buffet of I like this religion, this part of this religion. I don't like that part. And man, like I trust me, I've wrestled with that a lot. Thinking that maybe this is all connected to the same God. You know what I mean? Like, these are all different avenues to the same God. I've definitely wrestled with that. I've definitely thought that. I've definitely been there. But just over the years, the one thing that God has made real clear to me is there definitely is a devil. Like, there definitely is, an evil, and not to get like into dualistic mindsets or anything, like not to make it like that. But when I realized there actually is something out there that is destroying people, there's an unexplained evil in the world. You know what I mean? Like, we have people that are killing kids and raping kids. Like, where's that come from? Like, I'd love to hear like kind of your thoughts on that a little bit, of like, because when I started realizing, I'm like, man, dude, that's not normal. That's not like, oh, I got angry and wanted to fight someone. That's like, you're surpassing a level of deep, like, desolation, and just like, you know what I mean? And so I don't know, what would you think like that kind of stuff comes from? Just barbarian, like.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly barbaric at at a level, right? Um, it's definitely a difficult topic to discuss, because I know that if anyone is listening and they've been a part of that, it can bring up a lot of emotion. So, guys, that was the our third cutoff. We're having some Wi-Fi interrupted issues, and so I think what Joshua and I have both thought of and considered is that what we're going to do is just kind of make this the very first like foundation of our conversation, and we're gonna leave the door open then, once, because Joshua's moving soon, so he's gonna set up in a new place with some Wi-Fi, and then we'll revisit this conversation, because I have a lot of questions about his story and about where to go with this. And honestly, maybe this is also powerful. You guys, if you have questions for Joshua, go down into the description below, shoot me a message. I know there's going to be like a questions and comments link. So click on that, shoot me a message, say, hey, this is a question for Joshua. And so then next time when Joshua comes back on, we'll have my questions and we'll have some audience questions prepared for him as well. So with all that being said, I know we kind of got cut off on the last question that Joshua had for me, but we're going to hold that as a cliffhanger for the next podcast that we do together. So in wrapping this up, Joshua, I always give the floor to my guests. First of all, thank you for being on here. It was truly an honor. It's great
Yeah.
to connect with you. So I'll have all your links. Please reference those down below. But if there's anything you want to encourage the audience to do, anything you want to promote of your own, I love leaving this time for the guest. So with that being said, the floor is yours.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on here, and let me share that story and share the space with you. If you want to follow me, I have a TikTok at Joshua_Kingdom Priest. Same with my Instagram. I have a YouTube, Joshua Zatkoff. I'm off and on with my own podcast called Farewell to the Surface. But yeah, I appreciate just coming into these places and having conversations. Like I told you, before we hopped on here, I'm very much open to talking about different things. I very much stand in my faith in Christ, and I believe in that. But I'm not opposed to having these conversations, and so it's always joyful for me whenever I can do them with somebody where it's like done respectfully, and this isn't, you know what I mean? It's not like no one's trying to like, you're wrong, I'm right. Like, look, I just, I stand in my convictions, but we can do this in a way, and so I appreciate that, that so far we've been able to do that, and so I look forward to continuing to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't I don't think anybody wins whenever you have those types of situations. So I'm very much, in that same exact energy of just like, hey, here's everything I've compiled from my life. Here's everything you've compiled from your life. Let's see where they overlap. Let's see where we disagree. If we disagree, why do we disagree? So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely want to leave this open for a part 2, as we can maybe dive a little bit more into your story. Let's see what questions the audience has, and then kind of see how these like things intersect. Where are the things that we, kind of jive and don't
Yeah,
jive with? So
for sure.
super cool, dude. I'm already excited for that. I know we have
Yeah.
crazy technical difficulties here. No clue what's going on, but I kind of usually see it as spirit or God's way of saying that we've exhausted the conversation we were supposed to have today. So, with that being said, Joshua, thank you so much for being here. Guys, go check out all of his stuff. The links are down below. And hopefully, you'll tune in for part 2. I know it's going to be a juicy one. And
Yeah.
if you don't, that's totally cool, because we will all see each other in the 6th dimension.